The rain had been coming down over Marsden Cross since noon, and by 7 o'clock the gutters along Kirkgate ran brown with it. Honor Sedgley had lit the second lamp a full hour earlier than she liked, because the light through the front window had gone the color of dishwater, and she could no longer read her own hand in the subscription ledger. The shop had been empty since 5:30, when the Pickersgill boy had come in with a water-stained volume of natural history, borrowed 3 weeks past, and due back in 2. He had held it out across the desk with his ears going scarlet, waiting to be told what he already knew. Honor had entered the return without a word about the date or the stain. She had learned in another life that a child scolded over a ruined book simply stops coming for books. Before that, at 6, Owen Radlett had come in shaking the rain off his hat and put the borrowed volume down on the desk with more force than was necessary. He was 29, had been the town's doctor for 2 years, and was still, so far as the town was concerned, on trial. He borrowed more than anyone else on her books and returned everything early. "Have you seen a newspaper this week?" "I have seen 3. You left one of them here." "Sunderland." He said it the way another man might have named a disease, which she supposed he had. "A Keelman on the 9th. Then his wife. They are calling it the English cholera, and they are wrong, and by the spring there will be no arguing about it." "You sound almost pleased." "I sound frightened, which is a different thing and less becoming." He tapped the returned volume, a translation of a German treatise on well water that had stood unborrowed on her shelf for 3 years until he came. "The second part. Has it come?" "Not yet." "Then order it, put it to my account, and tell nobody what it concerns. If the vestry hears me on the subject of wells again before Christmas, they will have me out of the parish." He put his wet hat back on. "They say," he added at the door, in a different voice, "that the London man has been up to Endersby twice this year. There is always talk about Endersby." "There is remarkably little talk about Endersby," said Radlett. "That is rather my point." She wrote the last line of the day's entries, returned, vol. I, the 17th, and had reached for the blotter when the door opened again. The wind came in first, then a man, filling the doorway. Water running off the shoulders of a dark coat that had cost more than everything in her shop put together. "I need a wife by tomorrow morning," he said. The words dropped into the room like a book knocked off a shelf. Honor did not look up at once. She finished blotting the line, laid the blotter down, and only then raised her eyes to him. She knew the face. The whole town knew the face, though not one of them had ever been looked at twice by it. The Earl of Thirlstone, master of Endersby Hall, 3 miles north on the York Road, the house of which people said, in the particular hushed way they said such things, that no sound had come out of it in 8 months. He had never once set foot in her shop before tonight. She took him in the way she had once taken in a new child at the door of a schoolroom, quickly and without appearing to. He had come himself, in the rain, at 7 in the evening, which meant there was nobody he trusted to send. He had not taken his hat off, which meant he did not expect to be asked to stay. And under the exhaustion, and it was real exhaustion, 4 or 5 days of it, banked up behind the eyes, there was no shame in his face at all. Whatever this was, he had got past being ashamed of it some hours ago. Honor did not ask him to say it again. She did not exclaim. She rose, walked past him to the door, turned the key, and drew the curtain across the front window with the same unhurried hand she used to close the shop every evening of her life, as if an earl demanding a wife were only the last customer of the day. "Come through," she said, nodding toward the back room. "Sit down." He hesitated. It had been a long while since anyone in this county had given him an instruction. Then he followed her, because he had nowhere else to go and nobody else left to ask. The back room held a table, 2 chairs, a small fire nearly out. and shelves of books too broken to lend. Honor pushed the fire once with the poker and set the poker down. She did not offer him tea. She closed the door and folded her hands in front of her. "Before I answer anything, my lord, you will tell me the truth. All of it. I don't bargain with half a story." He sat. For a long moment he said nothing at all, and Honor watched the muscle work along his jaw, as though each word had a price attached to it, and he was counting out coins. "My daughter is 7 years old," he said at last. "She has not spoken a whole sentence since we buried her mother." Outside, the rain went on hitting the covered glass. Honor Sedgley, 31 years old, keeper of a lending library. The woman who 5 years ago had told a child to wait until later pulled out the second chair and sat down across from him. "Go on," she said. His name was Nicholas Ardern, and he told it badly, which she took as the first honest thing about him. He gave her the dates the way a man gives evidence. His wife Isabel had died in February. It was now the 18th of October. Their daughter Cecily had been 6 then and was 7 now, and had answered questions in the 8 months since, but only in ones and twos. Yes, no, cold nothing. She had not begun a sentence of her own since the funeral, and had not finished one at all. "She sits," he said. "That is the whole of it. She sits in rooms and watches the door." "Watching for what?" "I don't know. Have you asked her?" "No." He said it flatly, without excuse, and Honor found she respected the refusal to dress it up. "I did not know how to begin, and every month it became harder to begin, and then it had been 8 months. She let that sit between them a moment. "And the wife you need by morning?" He drew out a folded paper and set it on the table between them, and did not push it toward her. "My wife's brother is Sir Gideon Wrensham of Grangeworth. In June he filed a suit in Chancery concerning Cecily. She has been a ward of the court since the 22nd of that month. Nothing may now be decided about her, not her schooling, not her residence, not a penny of her mother's settlement without the court. In July they petitioned to have her guardianship transferred to Sir Gideon and Lady Augusta. On what ground? That my house is not fit to raise a girl." He looked at the fire rather than at her. "The particular words are that the household wants the ordinary superintendence of a woman." "You have no sister? No aunt?" "My sister is at Madras and has been for 9 years. My mother is dead. There is no one on my side to produce." "You have a governess, surely, Miss Wynne. 4 years in the house." A pause. "A governess is a servant, Miss Sedgley." Sir Gideon's counsel would have her struck out of the argument in a sentence, and he would be right too. What they want to see is a woman of standing in the household, a wife. Honor drew the folded paper toward her and opened it. It was a license issued out of the Archbishop's registry at York, permitting the marriage of Nicholas Ardern, Earl of Thirlstone, widower of the parish of Endersby, too. The space was blank. She looked at the blank space for a considerable time. "It was granted on Monday," he said. "I did not then know whose name would go in it. I would rather you heard that from me than found it out afterwards. When is the hearing?" 11 o'clock tomorrow, at York. Master Ewbank has the reference. He will examine us himself." He turned his hands over on his knees. "I know what you are about to say, then say it for me. That a marriage made in a night looks worse than no marriage at all. That I will walk into that room and hand Sir Gideon the very thing he wants, a woman who married a title in the dark." He met her eyes for the first time since sitting down. "Yes, it may fail. I have no better card, and I have run out of mornings to wait for one." Honor folded the license along its own creases and set it back down. "Sit still," she said, "and listen, because I am going to speak now, and I do not intend to be interrupted." He sat still. "If I do this, it will not be a performance, and it will not be silent on my part. There will be conditions, and you will agree to every one of them before I put my name to anything. If you cannot agree, Say so now, and we will both be spared the mourning. Say them. First, she did not count them on her fingers. She did not need to. The child comes before everything. Before your name, before the court, before whatever this marriage is meant to solve for you. If there is ever a choice between her welfare and your convenience, you already know which one I will take, and you will not be surprised by it later. There was a pause. It was not a long pause, half a second perhaps. No more than a man takes to draw breath before an easy answer, but Honor, who had spent 4 years watching children decide whether to lie to her, noticed it. Agreed, he said. Second, her mother is not to be erased from that house. Not the portrait, not her things, not her name at table. I will not have your daughter taught to forget in order to make me comfortable. Agreed. Third, nobody tells that child what to call me, and nobody tells her whom to love. Not you, not your household, not the court. If she comes to me at all, it will be because she chose to. If she never does, that is her right, and I will not have it treated as a failure of hers. Agreed. Fourth, I will have real authority in that nursery, not the appearance of it. If I say a thing is needed for her, it is done, not weighed by your housekeeper, not referred to your brother-in-law, not put off until you have thought about it. Agreed. Fifth, Honor's voice dropped, and it was the only place in the whole recital where it changed at all. There will be no pretense of love for her benefit. She has lost her mother. She will not now be handed a lie, dressed up as a family. Whatever this is between you and me, she will be told only what is true, in the measure she can carry it. If she asks me tomorrow whether I married you for her sake or for a title, I will tell her the truth, and you will not stop me. For a long moment, Nicholas Ardern said nothing. The fire had gone almost out. When he spoke, his voice had lost the flatness he had carried in with him. I accept every one of them, he said. I would have accepted them without your asking. Though I own I had not thought to put a single one of them into words until you said them aloud. Honor rose and went to the window, though there was nothing to see through the drawn curtain, and stood with her back to him. Then we marry in the morning, she said, and you will not waste an hour of it pretending this is anything other than what it is. After he had gone, she sat for a while in the cold back room without lighting the lamp again. She was thinking about a schoolroom in Leeds. She had gone there at 22, in the autumn of 1839, to a ragged school off Kirkgate, with a leaking roof and 81 names on its books, and never more than 40 children in the room at once. They came when they were not wanted at the mill and stayed away when they were. She had taught them letters and figures, and, when there was time, the map of a world none of them would ever see. She had been good at it. She had thought, for 4 years, that being good at it was the whole of the work. Sarah Coyne was 11 and came on Tuesdays and Fridays, and in March of 1843 she came on a Tuesday with a mark down the side of her face that had gone the color of a plum. Honor had asked about it. Sarah had said she had gone over on the stair. Honor had looked at the mark and at the child and had known, not suspected, known that the stair had not done it. And there had been 38 other children in the room, and a slate lesson half finished, and a school inspector expected on the Thursday. And Honor R. had put her hand on Sarah Coyne's shoulder and said the kindest sentence she could find. Sit down and finish your letters. We shall talk about it later. There had been no later. Sarah did not come on the Friday, nor the Tuesday after. When at last somebody went to the court off Marsh Lane to ask, the asking was no longer any use to anybody. At the inquest, which was held in the parlor of a public house because there was nowhere else, a surgeon used the word neglect, and a jury of 13 men used the word accident, and it took them under 4 minutes. Honor sat at the back with her hands in her lap and was not called. There was nothing she could have said that would have altered the single fact that mattered, which was that she had had her hand on that child's shoulder and had taken it away again. She could recall almost nothing of the funeral. She could recall, with a clarity that had not faded in 5 years, the sound of 38 children going on with a slate lesson behind her while she said the words. There was a register still, presumably, in a cupboard in Leeds, with a line ruled through a name in her own hand. She had ruled it herself on the last Friday of March, because the rule was that the register must be kept accurately, and there was nobody else to do it. She left the school in the June she did not leave because she was heartbroken, though she was. She left because she had discovered a thing about herself she could not put down, that in the moment it mattered she had chosen the lesson, the inspector, the ordinary running of the day. She could not trust herself in front of another frightened child, and she would not risk being wrong twice. She had come to Marsden Cross the following spring and taken the lease of a narrow shop on Kirkgate and filled it with books, and for 4.5 years she had lent them out, taken them, and asked nothing of anybody. It had been a quiet life, built deliberately, and she had never once pretended to herself that it was anything but a hiding place. Now she lit the lamp. She wrote 2 letters. The first was to her landlord, Mr. Ackroyd, giving up the lease of the shop from Michaelmas Quarter. The second was to Mrs. Ivy Halstead in the house adjoining, offering her the stock, the shelves, the subscription book, and the goodwill for £30, payable when she had it, and asking her to come at 7 in the morning for the keys. She could have kept the lease. That was the thing she made herself look at squarely, sitting there with the ink drying and the rain still going on outside. She could have kept it another quarter, another year. It would have cost her £11, and nobody in the world would have thought worse of her for it, and Mr. Ackroyd would have been glad of the money. It was the sensible provision of a woman with no family and no settlement of her own marrying a stranger into a house full of lawyers. And it would have been a door standing open behind her all the same. She knew exactly what she was, and she knew what a woman with somewhere to go back to does in the first week the work turns ugly. She had been that woman once, in June of 1843. And she had walked out of a schoolroom and taken the coach to a town where nobody knew her, and she had called it grief for 5 years, because grief was the more respectable word. She sealed both letters and put them under the door of the house next door herself, in the rain, at 11 o'clock at night. Then she went upstairs and laid out her gray dress for the morning, because it was the only one she owned that would not look like an opinion. The marriage took 11 minutes. There were no flowers and no music and nobody to see it but the people required by law. The curate of Marsden Cross had been got out of bed at 5:30 and was not pleased about it, and became less pleased when he read the license and found the bride's name written into the blank in a hand different from the rest of the document. "This is irregular," he said. "It is valid," said Nicholas Ardern. "That is not the same thing, my lord." "No," Nicholas agreed, "it is not." He paid the fee, and the curate, having made his objection and been heard, put on his surplice. The witnesses were the Earl's coachman and Mrs. Halstead from next door, who had come for the keys at 7 as instructed and been redirected to the church instead, and who spent the whole of the service looking as though she had been struck across the back of the head. Honor wore the gray dress she had closed her shop in the night before. There had been neither time nor any wish to dress as though this were a wedding and not the settling of an emergency. When the curate came to the vows, Honor's voice did not falter, but it carried none of the softness a bride is supposed to bring to them. She spoke the words the way she had once given a lesson to a roomful of children who needed certainty a great deal more than they needed warmth. Nicholas matched her, plain and unornamented, and he kept his eyes on her rather than on the priest, as if he needed to see for himself that she meant it. When it was done, there was no kiss. There was only a long look between two people who understood exactly what they had promised and exactly what they had not. Nicholas folded the certificate into his coat. "Are you ready to go?" "Yes." They were on the York Road by 6:30, with the lamps still lit, and neither of them spoke for the first 4 miles. There had been no breakfast, no health drunk, no moment set aside to mark that anything had altered. Nicholas had paid the curate, folded the paper into his coat, and asked whether she was ready, in the tone of a man moving to the next item on a long list. Honor found that she did not mind it. She had not married for ceremony, and a wedding breakfast would have been a lie told with silver on the table. She had married because there was a child in a cold house who needed one adult who would not disappear, and the vows, bare as they were, had been an accurate account of that, and nothing else. She had heard prettier weddings in her life. She had not heard many truer ones. Endersby Hall stood back from the road behind a line of beeches that had held their leaves late that year. It was a gray block of a house, handsome enough, with a stable court to the east and a chapel at the western end of the lawn. And Honor understood the town's phrase the moment the carriage came up the drive. It was not that the house was silent. Horses moved in the court. A dog barked somewhere behind the kitchens. A gardener was cutting back the beech hedge with a hook and made a wet, regular sound doing it. It was that none of the noise came from inside. The housekeeper was waiting under the portico, a square, upright woman of about 60, with gray hair drawn back hard. "Mrs. Threlfall," Nicholas said. "This is Lady Thirlstone." Honor watched the housekeeper receive it. Mrs. Threlfall's face did a great deal of work in a short space of time and arrived, finally, at correctness. "My lady, Mrs. Threlfall." Behind her, in the shadow of the hall, stood a thin woman of about 36, in a dark dress, with her hands at her waist. She did not come forward. "Miss Wynne," said Nicholas. "My daughter's governess." "Miss Wynne," said Honor. "My lady." The governess's voice was low and gave away nothing whatever. She looked at Honor for perhaps 2 seconds longer than was comfortable, and then looked away. The hall was cold and very clean. There was a long case clock at the foot of the stairs, and Honor could hear it. In a house that size, with a household of 11 indoors, she could hear a clock. "We have less than 3 hours," Nicholas said. "Mrs. Threlfall will show you where you may wash and change if you wish to." "I don't wish to." Then Honor had stopped because she had seen the child. Cecily Ardern was standing on the half-landing above them, behind the turned balusters, in a gray pinafore, with her dark hair drawn back so tightly and so neatly that it looked like an act of desperate housekeeping, performed by somebody who did not know what else to do. She had not made a sound coming down. She was not hiding, exactly. She was standing quite still with her hand on the rail, looking down into the hall, and she was looking at Honor. Honor did not smile at her. She did not call up a greeting, or say something bright about how they should be great friends, or move one step toward the stairs. She looked back and let herself be looked at, for as long as the child wanted. Then Cecily turned and went up out of sight, and there was no sound from her going either. "She will not come down," Mrs. Threlfall said, with the flatness of a woman reporting a fact 8 months old. "Not for strangers." "She came down," said Honor. "She simply didn't come the whole way." Nobody had an answer for that. Nicholas was looking at the empty half-landing with an expression Honor could not yet read. "We had better go," she said. Master Ewbank's chambers at York were on a first floor above a stationer's, and the fire in them was too small for the room. 4 men sat at a long table with their papers laid out in front of them, like a verdict already reached. Master Ewbank himself was 63, with a heavy face and hands that stayed folded. To his right sat a clerk. Facing him, for the petitioners, sat Sergeant Lyle, 50 silver, unhurried, a man who had plainly never in his life needed to raise his voice, and beside Lyle, in black, with his hat on his knee, sat Sir Gideon Rensham. Honor had expected to dislike him on sight and found, unhelpfully, that she did not. He was a big man gone slightly soft, 45 or so, with his sister's coloring, and he looked up when they came in with an expression of such open and undisguised grief that she had to remind herself what he was there to do. Mr. Colton, for the Earl, made his appearance in 6 sentences. Sergeant Lyle made his in rather more, and made it well. He did not accuse anybody of anything. He simply built, brick by brick, a picture of a house in which a motherless child of 7 had been left for 8 months to fall silent, in which no woman of any standing had presided, and in which the ordinary machinery of a girl's upbringing had, he regretted to say, stopped. Then he said, and I am bound to add, sir, that there are circumstances attending the death of the late Countess, which this court will not, I hope, be obliged to consider today. He sat down. Honor waited for somebody to take it up. Colton did not. Master Ewbank made a small note and did not look up. The sentence lay on the table where Lyle had dropped it, and nobody touched it. She filed it away. Lady Thirlstone, said Master Ewbank, and it took her a full second to understand that he meant her. You were married this morning. At 6 o'clock, sir. To a man you had met, I am told, at 7 o'clock last night. Yes. Why? Colton half rose. Honor put her hand flat on the table in front of her, and he sat down again. Because a child was being discussed as a piece of property, she said, by men who have never once sat with her in the dark. The clerk's pen stopped. I did not marry for affection, sir, and I will not insult this room by pretending otherwise. If I stood here and told you I had lost my heart to his lordship in the course of an evening, you would be right to disbelieve me, and you would be right to take the child away from a woman who would say such a thing to a court. So I will tell you the truth instead, and let it do what it does. There is a girl of 7 in that house who has not finished a sentence since February. And the question before you is not whether her father's marriage is romantic. It is whether there is now an adult in that household who will not go away. And you will not go away. No, sir. You are aware, said Master Ewbank, that you have no experience whatever of a household of that kind. I have no experience of the household. I have 4 years' experience of frightened children in a ragged school in Leeds, where I had 81 of them on the books and no assistant. I will not claim that qualifies me to order dinner for a duke. I would claim it qualifies me for the only part of this that matters. Sergeant Lyle, without rising, said pleasantly, a ragged school. In Leeds?
Yes. We may come back to Leeds.
You may, said Honor. Master Ewbank unfolded his hands, which he had not done once in half an hour, and everybody in the room noticed it. I will not make the order sought by the petitioners, he said, and Sir Gideon's head came up, nor will I discharge the reference. It is put to me that this household has been wanting in superintendence. It is answered that the want has this morning been supplied. I decline to decide a child's future upon a marriage 11 minutes old. Sir, said Lyle, you will have your opportunity, Sergeant Lyle, in the fullness of time, and I have no doubt the fullness of time will be very full indeed. Ewbank turned a page. Miss Cecily Ardern remains a ward of this court. She remains at Endersby Hall in her father's household. I will report to the Lord Chancellor at the expiration of 6 months from today, and I will hear the parties again upon that report. He wrote for a moment. In the meantime, and for the assistance of the court, I appoint Mr. Osmond Frail to reside at Endersby Hall, and to observe the arrangements made there for the ward. He will have free access to the house and the nursery. He will report to me in writing. He will not interfere. A man Honor had not noticed at all rose from a chair by the door, 50-odd narrow, entirely unremarkable, holding a leather-covered notebook against his chest. "Mr. Frail," said Eubank, "will take up residence tomorrow." They came out onto the stairs at 12:15. Honor understood, going down them, exactly what she had bought that morning, and it was not what she had gone in believing. She had thought that the marriage would end the danger. What it had done was buy 6 months and put a man with a notebook in her hallway. Everything she said in that house from tomorrow morning, every hour she gave the child and every hour she failed to, every word out of her own mouth, would be written down in a leather-covered book by a stranger and read aloud at York in April. Sir Gideon Wrensham was standing at the foot of the stairs, drawing on his gloves, and he said it quite clearly, to nobody, at exactly the moment she passed him. "Married in a night, for a title she has not earned and a child she does not know." Honor did not turn her head. She had learned a long time ago that certain fights are not won by answering the first insult. They are won by lasting long enough for the truth to outlive it. In the carriage, when they had cleared the Micklegate bar, she said, "What are the circumstances attending your wife's death?" Nicholas was looking out of the window. "An old sadness," he said. Honor let 3 miles go by. Then she said, without any particular emphasis, "You will remember the first condition." "I remember it." "I don't think you do," she said, and neither of them spoke again until the Beeches. Mr. Osmond Frail arrived at 11 the following morning with 1 trunk, a writing case, and an umbrella, and was put in the blue room at the head of the second stair, which was the room a family would have given to a poor relation. Honor received him in the hall herself. "You are welcome in every room of this house except my bedchamber and Miss Wynn's," she said. "You may come into the nursery whenever you please, and you need not knock. Nobody in my household will be instructed to be pleasant to you, and nobody will be instructed to be unpleasant either. If you ask me a question, I will answer it truthfully, or I will tell you that I decline to answer. I will not tell you a lie in order to look well in April." Mr. Frail considered this with his hands at his sides. "That is more than I am generally offered, my lady." "I imagine it is. Have you eaten?" "I have not." "Then that is the first thing," said Honor, and went to see about it herself, because the housekeeper had not yet decided what a court officer was. She went up to the nursery at 3 o'clock alone, having asked Mrs. Threlfall not to announce her. It was a long room on the west side with 2 windows and a fire that had been kept up properly, which Honor noted and gave credit for. A rocking horse stood against the wall, with its paint worn off the near side and not at all off the other. There was a table with a slate on it and a shelf of books arranged by height rather than by anything else, and over the mantelpiece there was a portrait of a fair woman of about 30 in a green gown, painted well enough to show that whoever had sat for it had been laughing 3 seconds before and had been asked to stop. Miss Wynne was at the table with a copybook in front of her. She rose. "I should like to sit with her a while," Honor said. "By ourselves." The governess did not move at once. It was not insolence. Honor could not have called it insolence to anyone's face. It was a hesitation of about 2 seconds, during which Miss Wynne looked from Honor to the child and back again, and then gathered the copybook and went out and shut the door with great care. Honor filed it in the way she filed things and was wrong about what it meant for 5 months. Cecily Ardern sat in a chair too large for her, with her hands folded in her lap in the same gray pinafore, with her hair drawn back so hard that it pulled at the skin above her ears. She did not stand up. She did not look at the door as it closed. She looked at Honor, steadily, the way a person looks at a stranger, who has walked into a room that used to be safe, checking her over for the lie that everyone else had brought. Honor did not speak from the doorway. She crossed the floor slowly enough for the child to watch her come the whole way, and then she knelt down, so that nothing about the height of her suggested authority, and so that they were level. They looked at one another for a long time. "Her place?" said Cecily. 2 words. Honor heard the whole of the question that was folded up inside them, and she took her time answering, because a fast answer is what a liar gives. "No," she said. "Nobody takes the place of a mother who was loved. I shan't try, and I shouldn't insult her by pretending I could." She let that stand a moment. "I am going to live in this house. I am not going away again. Those are 2 separate things from the one you asked me, and they are the only 2 I can promise you today." Cecily's face did not alter, not visibly, not in any way that a careless person in the doorway would have caught. But something behind it moved, the smallest slackening, the loosening of a breath, half let go in a child who had spent 8 months braced for every adult to disappoint her in the same tired manner. Honor said nothing more. She had learned, in another room, in another year, with another frightened child, that some silences do not want filling. They want believing. That evening, Mrs. Threlfall came to her in the small sitting room with the air of a woman discharging a delicate duty. "About the picture in the nursery, my lady. If your ladyship would wish it moved to the long gallery, it can be done quietly, while the child is at her walk. And she'd not. It stays. My lady, it stays where it is, at the height it is, and nobody moves it for my comfort or for anyone's." Honor put down her pen. "It is the only mother that girl has left. I won't be the reason she loses sight of her face." Mrs. Threlfall's mouth worked once. "Very good, my lady," she said, and Honor could not tell, and did not much care, whether the woman was offended or relieved. "One other thing. There is a pianoforte in the morning room with the lid down. Her late ladyship played. When did she stop?" The housekeeper was silent for slightly too long. 2 years since. Thereabouts. 2 years before she died." "Yes, my lady." Honor turned that over and put it away. "Nobody is to open it," she said. "Not to dust it, not to tune it, not to cheer the house up. When the child wants it open, she will say so." Later she went up with a small wooden box under her arm. It was walnut, about the size of a family Bible, with a brass lock and a brass key on a length of green ribbon. She had bought it that morning in Marsden Cross with her own money, of which she had £11 in the world. "This is yours," she said. "Not the house's, not mine, not your father's. There is one key, and it is on this ribbon, and there is no other. Whatever of your mother's you want to keep, you put in it and you lock it, and nobody in this house will ever ask you to open it. Not Mrs. Threlfall when she is tidying, not me." Cecily took the box in both hands. She turned it over once in her lap and ran her finger along the seam of the lid, pressing, testing whether it was the sort of promise that comes apart later. Then she held it against her chest with both arms and did not put it down. From the doorway, unseen, Nicholas watched his daughter carry a wooden box up the passage to her room without once letting go of it, and did not understand what he had seen. He knew only that it had cost about 4 shillings, and that everything he had bought her since February had cost a great deal more, and had bought nothing. Honor did not chase her. She had learned, in a schoolroom off Kirkgate, that children who have been failed by adults do not give anything to the adult who arrives wanting to be loved. They give it, eventually and grudgingly, to the one who is simply there again on Thursday. So she built a timetable instead of a courtship. Breakfast at 8, and the child's place laid, whether she came down or not. Lessons from 9 until noon with Miss Wynne, dinner at 1. A walk before the light went, in the kitchen garden if it was wet, which in November it generally was. an hour of reading before the lamps. And then, every evening between 6:30 and 7, half an hour in the nursery in which Cecily might talk about her mother if she wished to, never hushed, never redirected toward something more cheerful, never followed by an adult saying, "Now let us think of something nice." For the first 3 weeks, nobody used the half hour at all. Honor used it anyway. She sat in the chair by the fire with mending or a book, and Cecily sat in the big chair with the box beside her, and at 7 Honor said good night and went down. 30 minutes, 21 evenings, in a room where the only sound was the fire, and twice the rocking horse when a draft took it. Mr. Frail came in on the 9th of those evenings, sat by the door, wrote for 6 minutes, and went out again. The tests began in the 4th week, and they were so small that a person who had not been looking for them would have called them nothing. Cecily left her boots in the middle of the passage outside her room, instead of carrying them down to be cleaned, an untidiness that asked, without asking, whether anybody would shout. Nobody shouted. The boots were still there in the morning, and the next night she left them again. And on the 3rd night she carried them down. She came to breakfast 5 minutes late and stopped in the doorway before entering to see whether her place had been cleared. It had not. She came 7 minutes late the following day and stood longer in the doorway. It had not been cleared then either. In the 1st week of December, she asked Honor a question in 3 words while the walk was being got ready. "When he's tired." Honor understood it and turned to face her properly before she answered, because it deserved that. "You are asking whether I shall go away when your father is tired of me." Cecily looked at the row of pegs. "No," said Honor. "I did not marry in order to be put down again afterwards. I don't know what your father will feel about me in a year, and neither does he, and I won't pretend to you that I do. But that isn't the same question as whether I shall be here. I shall be here. You will not come down one morning and find that I have gone in the night." There was no answer to that, and Honor had not expected one. But the question had been asked out loud instead of carried about in silence, and that was the first crack in a wall that had been built to keep a disappointment from arriving twice. The other business of that month was Miss Wynne, and Honor handled it badly, though she did not know so at the time. The timetable had been drawn up by the governess in September and included 2 hours of deportment on Wednesdays. Honor struck them out and put a walk in their place, and said so at the schoolroom table with Frail 3 feet away. "She is 7, and she does not go out enough. Her late ladyship desired the deportment," said Miss Wynne. "Her late ladyship is not in a position to be consulted, and I am." Honor heard how it sounded a half-second after it left her, and did not take it back, because taking it back in front of the court officer would have been worse. "You have the child. 6 hours a day, Miss Wynne. I do not propose to interfere with any of it except this. But this I do propose to change, and it is changed." "Very good, my lady." The governess's face had gone perfectly still, in the way of a woman who has decided that nothing she says will be heard. Honor read that stillness as resentment of a Milltown schoolmistress giving orders in a great house. It was not resentment, but Honor was 4 months, and one catastrophe away from finding that out. Nicholas did not bring his daughter presents. He was not a stupid man, and he had grasped sometime in the summer that presents had stopped working. What he did instead was worse. The first was a physician. Dr. Massingham came up from London on the 11th of November, examined Cecily twice, tested her hearing with a watch, made her say the cat sat upon the mat 11 times, and departed with 40 guineas and the opinion that there was no organic defect. The second was a Mr. Peverell of Harrogate, who taught elocution to the sons of manufacturers and came twice a week for 3 weeks to sit opposite a 7-year-old with a mirror and make her form vowels. The third was a child. A neighbor's daughter of 8 was brought over every Thursday at 2 to play, the neighbor being anxious to oblige an earl. She came 4 times. She was a perfectly pleasant girl, and she was miserable because she had been told to be nice to Lady Cecily, and Cecily could tell. After every one of these, Cecily went further off. She stopped leaving her boots in the passage. She came to breakfast on the hour again, and ate exactly enough. On the 2nd of December, after Mr. Peveril's 4th visit, she did not use the evening half-hour, and did not look up when Honor came in. And Honor sat for 30 minutes in a room that had gone back 3 weeks. She watched it happen twice. On the 3rd occasion, when Nicholas came in from the stable court with a letter in his hand and told her he had written to a man in Edinburgh who had done wonders with a mute boy in Fife, Honor followed him into the study and closed the door behind her. "She is not broken," she said. Nicholas turned round. "I beg your pardon? Your daughter is not broken, and you are hiring men to come and mend her, and she knows exactly what they are for. Every carriage that comes up that drive tells her the same thing. There is something the matter with you, and we are paying to have it taken out. I am trying. Trying is not the same as understanding what she needs, and it is not the same as sitting still, which is the only thing she has ever asked of anybody in this house." Honor did not raise her voice. She had never needed to. "Guilt is not fatherhood, my lord. It is a performance staged for your own relief and dressed up as generosity for hers. She can tell the difference. I am sorry to say that she can tell it a great deal more easily than you can." It landed harder than she had meant it to. She saw it land and did not soften it. Nicholas stood very still by the window for a long moment. His jaw had the set of a man who has not been contradicted since he was 19. Then he said, and his voice had lost all of its defense, "Then tell me what she needs. Patience, not performance. That is not an instruction." "Very well. Here is an instruction." Honor came a step closer. "Go up to the nursery after dinner. Take the estate book or a newspaper. Sit in the corner chair. Do not ask her a question. Do not ask her how she is. Do not look at her face to see whether she is pleased that you have come. Read your book for half an hour and then say good night and go. Do that on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday, and on Saturday do it again. And expect nothing whatever to happen, because for a long while nothing will. And if she does not want me there, she will let you know. Let her be unimpressed by you. That is not failure, my lord. That is a child deciding in her own time whether you are safe, and it is the only decision in this house that neither you nor I nor a court in York is entitled to make for her." He wrote to the man in Edinburgh that evening. Honor saw the letter go into the bag and said nothing about it, having said what she had to say. 2 days later she came up at 9 and found the nursery door standing half open and her husband in the corner chair, with the drainage accounts of the home farm on his knee, reading, saying nothing, while at the table his daughter drew a horse with too many legs and did not look up. He was doing it badly. He was sitting too upright, and he had turned his chair a few degrees toward the table when it ought to have faced the fire, and twice in 10 minutes his eyes went to the child's face and came back. But he was there, and he had brought nothing with him, and he did not ask her for a single thing. Honor went downstairs without letting either of them know she had been up. The first case at Marsden Cross was a weaver's wife in the row of 8 cottages along the beck, and she was dead in 14 hours. That was the 16th of December. By the 20th, there were 5 in that row and 1 on Water Lane, and Owen Radlett was standing in Honor's hall at 7 in the morning with mud to the knee, saying the thing that nobody in the parish wished to hear. It is not the air. It is the well at the bottom of Belfold. The privies of the whole road drain toward it, and have done since it was dug. Every family that has taken water from it this week is dead or dying, and the 2 houses that draw from the pump by the smithy are untouched. It is the water, my lady. And if I say it once more at the vestry, they will have me before the guardians for want of respect. Then don't say it at the vestry, said Honor. Say it to me. Under the new act, a local board could be got up if a tenth of the ratepayers of the district petitioned for it. Honor sat down that morning with Mr. Bardsey, the estate agent, and the rate book, and worked out that a tenth of the ratepayers of Marsden Cross was 31 men. By the 23rd, she had 27 signatures. She got them in 4 days, in December on foot, going up the yards off Kirkgate in a plain gray dress with a borrowed umbrella and a clerk's list. The publican signed, and the saddler signed, and both grocers signed. The corn factor would not, because it would put a rate on him. The vicar would not, because it was a slight upon Providence. 6 farmers on the Endersby land would not, because a board meant a surveyor, and a surveyor meant money. 4 short. She did not wait for the 4. That was the other thing she did in that week, and it was not in the act at all. She had the estate's tithe barn cleared and strawed and lime-washed, and put 9 beds in it, and told Mrs. Threlfall that the copper in the back kitchen was to be kept going day and night, and that every drop of water that went into Endersby Hall or out of it in a can would be boiled first. She had Bardsey nail boards over the well at Bell Fold, and the second well behind the Black Bull, and post a man at each for a week, at the estate's cost, because a boarded well in a hard frost will be opened again by somebody with a bucket by Thursday. Mr. Frail wrote in his book, in a hand Honor never saw, that the Countess of Thirlstone had that week engaged in matters outside the ordinary province of her sex, had given orders in the language of command to men not of her household, and had absented herself from the ward for the better part of 4 days. Every word of it was true. The landowners of the Wapentake met at the Rose and Crown on the 28th, and Nicholas Ardern went to it, and Honor did not, because her presence would have cost him the room. She had told him, the night before, precisely what it would cost him to sign. They will say you have been got at by your wife. They will. They will say it in every hall between here and Ripon, and the men who say it dine with you, and their sons shoot with you, and it will not stop in a year. She looked at him steadily. I am telling you what it is before you do it, not after. That is all. Is that a warning or a test? I don't set tests, said Honor. I have never had the time. He signed at the Rose and Crown at 2:30 in front of 19 men, and then he stood up and said, in a room that had gone quiet, that he was aware of what a Board of Health would cost the estate in rates, and that he proposed to pay it, and that any gentleman who wished to tell him he had been managed by a wife might tell him so now, and not afterwards. Nobody told him. 2 men left before the port. Bardsey signed forth from last, and the 31st name was got on the 2nd of January from a widow, who kept a dame school on Water Lane and who signed because she had buried a scholar. 9 people died at Marsden Cross that winter. In February it stopped, and the parish decided it was over, and the ratepayers who had refused went about saying it had been a mild business after all, and a great fuss about a well. Radlett came to the hall on a wet evening in the 3rd week of February, and stood in front of the fire without taking off his coat. It has not gone, he said. It has gone quiet. It does that. In 32 it went quiet in the winter, and came back in the June like a house falling down. He looked at the boarded lid of the pianoforte, which nobody had explained to him. Keep the barn. Keep the copper going. And when the warm weather comes, my lady, do not let anybody tell you it is the air. The key was not hers, and she had had it since the summer. Cecily kept it under the mattress at the corner nearest the wall, where the ticking had a seam she could get 2 fingers into, and she moved it every few weeks because things that stay in one place get found. It was a small key, smaller than the brass one on the green ribbon, and it did not belong to anything in the house anymore. because the thing it belonged to had been a Japan tin box in her mother's dressing room, and the tin box had been taken away in the spring with all the rest. She kept the key because her mother had given it to her, and because giving something back was not one of the things she had been told she might do. What was in the walnut box was her mother's gray glove, the left one, which had been in the pocket of a coat in the passage, and which nobody had missed, a bird's egg, blown from before, a card of pins, and the paper. The paper was folded in four, and had been folded in four for 15 months, and was going soft along the creases like cloth. It was in her mother's hand on both sides. Cecily could read most of it now, which she had not been able to do at first, and she had stopped reading it in October because reading it made her feel the way you feel on the stairs when you have missed a step that is not there. She knew what she had been told. She had been told it twice, in the same words both times, by her mother sitting on the end of the bed in the dark, with her hand very tight round Cecily's wrist. Keep it. Don't give it to anybody. If you tell, they will take you away. Her mother had said other things that winter that were not true. Cecily knew that now, the way you know a thing without being able to say it to anybody. Her mother had said that the fire in the nursery smoked because of people talking about her. Her mother had said one morning that they would go to Italy on Tuesday. But Cecily did not know how to keep the parts that were not true and throw them out and keep the rest. And if she started throwing out the things her mother had said, then there would be a smaller and smaller number of them left, and one day there would be none at all. So she kept all of it. That was easier. That was the whole reason. It was also the reason she could not talk. Not in the way the grown-up people thought, which was that she was sad and had gone quiet, like a dog under a table. She was sad. That was a different thing, and it happened at different times. The trouble with talking was that talking runs. You answer one question, and the answer has a corner sticking out of it, and the next question takes hold of the corner. If you say the box is my mother's things, then somebody says, what things? My love. And then somebody says, may I see? And then you are in the part where you either tell them or you say no to a grown-up person to their face over and over for years and years. Cecily had worked this out in about March, when she was 6, sitting on the half landing, listening to her uncle's voice in the hall. So she used one word where one would do and two where it would not. And she found that if you do that, for long enough people stop putting the corners in front of you. They talk over your head instead. It is lonely, but it is quiet, and it is a great deal less frightening than being asked things. Miss Wynne was the difficulty. Miss Wynne knew there was something. She had never said so, and she had never asked, not once in 15 months. And she looked at Cecily, sometimes in a particular way over the top of the copybook, and every time she looked, Cecily remembered that she was carrying it. That was all. It was not that Miss Wynne was unkind. Miss Wynne was the person who had sat outside the door of the room in February and had not gone away. It was that being remembered at is very tiring when you are trying not to. Think about a thing for 15 months at a stretch. The new one was different. Cecily had waited for her to start. They all started. They came up the stairs, and they knelt down, and they made their voice go soft in the middle, and they said, "Your poor mama," and then, within a week, "Now we must be a cheerful girl," and then, within a month, they stopped coming up the stairs at all. The new one knelt down and said nobody takes the place of a mother who was loved, and then stopped talking. That had been the first strange thing. Then she gave her the box and did not ask what would go in it. Then she sat in the chair by the fire for half an hour every evening for 21 evenings and did not once say, "Would you like to tell me about your mama?" which was what the half hour was obviously for. On the 4th of January, Cecily, left the little key in the bed when she went down, because she had moved it in the night and had not put it back properly. And when she came up after the walk, it was lying on the coverlet, on top where anybody would see it. She stood in the doorway with her hands cold. Lady Thirlstone was at the far end of the room, putting coal on with the tongs, one piece at a time, the way she did everything. "That was under your mattress," she said, without turning round. "I found it when I turned the bed. It is on the coverlet, because I did not want you to come up and find it moved and think it had been taken." Cecily did not say anything. "If you are keeping something for somebody," said Honor, still not turning round, "I shan't take it off you. I only wanted you to know that I know there is something. That is the whole of it. I am not going to ask you what it is, now or at any other time." Then she put down the tongs and went out and left the door open behind her, which was a thing Cecily noticed, because the ones who want you to follow them close it. At 6:30 she came in with her mending and sat in the chair by the fire. Cecily sat in the big chair with the box beside her and the small key in her fist, and the fire made the noise fires make, and somewhere under the floor the long case clock in the hall went off and stopped. It was very hard. It was harder than anything she had done, harder than the funeral, harder than not crying in front of her uncle in the summer. She had a whole sentence in her, and she had not let one out in 15 months, and she had forgotten how heavy they are. "I made a promise," said Cecily. 4 words. She heard them go out into the room and could not get them back. Lady Thirlstone did not look up from the mending. Cecily watched her not look up, and understood that she was being given the room to say more or not say more, and that either would be all right. And it was such a strange thing to be given that she sat holding it in both hands like the box. "Then you must keep it," Honor said. "A promise is a promise, and it doesn't stop being one because the person you made it to has died. I shan't ask you to break it." She turned the seam and bit off the thread. "But you're 7, and it is a very large thing to be carrying by yourself. And I want to say one sentence to you, and then I shall leave it alone. If it ever gets too heavy, you may put it down in front of me, and I will not tell anybody. Not your father, not Mr. Frail, nobody." Cecily did not answer. At 7, Lady Thirlstone said good night and went down. Out on the landing, in the dark by the head of the stairs where he had been standing for 11 minutes with a lamp he had not lit, Nicholas Ardern put his hand flat against the wall. His daughter's silence had never been sullenness. It had never been grief that had lost its way. It had been a watch, set at 6 years old and kept without relief for 15 months, over something she believed would cost her everything if she let it go. The woman he had married in 11 minutes to satisfy a court had understood it inside of 11 weeks. He had lived along the passage from it since February and had called it stubbornness. The Wrenshams came on the 8th of February, by leave of the court, for 4 hours. Honor had expected to hate him at sight and had failed at that in York, and she failed again in her own drawing room, which was more inconvenient. Sir Gideon Wrensham was a big man going soft, with his sister's coloring and his sister's mouth, and he came into the house of the man he was suing with his hat in his hand and his grief entirely undisguised. He stopped in the hall in front of the long case clock and put his hand on the case of it. She used to hide in this, he said, to nobody. When she was 4, she could get the whole of herself in and shut the door. And there is a mark inside where she scratched at the weight, Nicholas said. After a moment, I did not know that. No, said Sir Gideon, without any edge at all. You would not. It was at Grangeworth. It was brought here when she married. Over the 4 hours he did that 3 times. He knew what Isabel had called the pony she had at 9, and which of her front teeth had come out crooked and been pulled, and that she could not eat gooseberries. Every one of them was offered as a gift, and every one of them landed on Nicholas Ardern like a small stone, and Honor understood, watching it, that Sir Gideon was not doing it on purpose, and that this was very much worse than if he had been. Lady Augusta Wrensham was 41, and had no children, and had brought none of the apparatus that people bring, no doll, no sweets, no bright voice. She came into the nursery, looked at the portrait over the mantel for a while without commenting on it, and then sat down on the hearthrug beside the coal scuttle in a good dress, with her feet tucked round, which cannot have been comfortable. "I am your Aunt Augusta, and you don't remember me," she said, "because you were 4 the last time, and at 4 one remembers nobody. I am going to tell you something about your mother that nobody else in this house knows, and then I am going to stop talking, because I know perfectly well why we are all here today, and I dislike it as much as you do." Cecily looked at her. "When your mother was 11, said Lady Augusta. "She was made to learn a poem for her father's birthday about a shipwreck, and it had 31 verses. She learnt 4 of them and made up the rest herself on the night, in front of the whole table, and she made them rhyme. And she got to the end, and not one of the grown-up people noticed, except me. I was sitting opposite her. She looked at me over the candles for 1 second in the middle of it, and then went straight on. There was a pause of about 3 seconds. Then Cecily laughed. It was not a large sound. It was one short breath of a laugh, out before she could catch it, and she put her hand over her mouth immediately afterwards, and looked frightened. But it had happened. It had happened in that room, where nothing had happened since February of the previous year, and Lady Augusta Wrensham had done it in 90 seconds with a story, sitting on the floor by the coal scuttle. Honor stood in the doorway and felt something go through her that she had no business whatever feeling. She named it accurately because she made a practice of that. It was not concern. It was not caution about the court. It was jealousy, plain and cheap. And it was the first genuinely ugly thing she had felt since she came to Endersby. And she stood in the doorway and let herself have it for about 4 seconds before she put it down. Because the woman on the hearthrug had done exactly the right thing. She had not asked the child to feel anything. She had given her back a piece of her mother that nobody else on earth had. It was better than anything Honor had done in 3 months. And Honor knew it. Later, at the foot of the stairs, Sir Gideon found her alone. He did not lower his voice, which she noticed. Men who intend a threat lower their voices. "I have been thinking, since York, that I owe you an apology," he said. "What I said on the stairs was contemptible, and I said it to be overheard. You will allow me to withdraw it." Honor inclined her head. "I do not think you are an adventuress," Sir Gideon said. "I thought so in October, and I was mistaken, and I would as soon say so to your face as to my own solicitor. I think you are a decent woman who has walked into the middle of something she does not understand." He drew on one glove and looked at the door of the drawing-room. "That is a great deal more dangerous, my lady, and it is not less dangerous because you mean well. If you should ever find yourself wondering what it is that you do not understand, I would ask you to consider coming to me before you go to anybody else." "Why should I do that?" "Because I would tell you the truth," he said, "and I am not at all sure that anybody else in this house would." He put on the second glove, bowed to her very correctly, and went out to the carriage. Honor stood in the hall for a long time after the wheels had gone, with the clock going behind her, and could not for the life of her make an answer to it. The anniversary went by on the 19th of February, and nobody in the house named it aloud except Honor, who said at breakfast, to the table, that it was a year that day, and that anyone who wished to go down to the chapel might go, and that she would be there at 11 if anyone wanted company, and would not be there at all if anybody would rather have it to themselves. Nicholas went at 11. Cecily went at 3:30 alone and was gone 40 minutes, and came back with her boots wet and said nothing, and nobody asked her anything. That was the last week in which Honor Sedgley was certain she was doing the work well. The trouble began with the grate. The nursery fire was laid by the housemaid at 7, and made up through the day by whoever was in the room, and Honor had got into the habit of doing it herself in the evening because it gave her hands something to be doing during the half hour. On the 22nd of February, she raked it forward and found, in the ash at the front where a draft had pushed it, a curl of laid paper about the size of a thumbnail that had scorched brown without catching. There was writing on it, 4 words and part of a fifth, in a strong sloping hand she had never seen in that house. Whether the child has. She sat back on her heels with it in her fingers and the tongs in her other hand. On the 27th there was more ash than a nursery fire makes. On the 4th of March, coming up unexpectedly at 4:30, because the walk had been cut short by hail, she met Miss Wynne on the stairs coming down from the nursery landing, with a candle at 4 in the afternoon, and Miss Wynne stopped and said good afternoon and went on. Honor went up and put her hand into the grate. The ash at the front was warm, and there was a fragment of green sealing wax in it the size of a pea. She began from that afternoon to keep a list. She was ashamed of the list afterwards, but at the time she wrote it out plainly, and she was right too, because everything on it was true. That Miss Wynne had been the late Countess's choice, not the Earl's. That she held the key of the wardrobe room where the late Countess's things had been put away, and that the Earl did not know she held it, having never asked. That she had hesitated 4 times to leave Honor alone with the child. That paper in an unknown hand, and wax of a color used by nobody at Endersby, had been burnt in that nursery at least 3 times in a fortnight, and that Cecily Ardern, who had begun in January to speak in whole sentences of 4 and 5 words, had spoken none in Miss Wynne's hearing, and went still in her chair whenever the governess came into the room. Honor took the list to her husband on the 6th of March. He read it twice, standing at the study window with his back to her, and when he had finished, he laid it on the desk and put a paperweight on it, which she found she resented very much. You believe she is Rensham's. I believe somebody with green wax and a sloping hand has been writing to my daughter's governess about my daughter, and that she has been burning it in the nursery grate rather than in her own, where it would be seen. And I believe that a woman who is not being paid burns letters in her own fire like everybody else. It is not evidence. It is a list of facts. Evidence is what a lawyer calls facts he's had time to arrange. Honor. He turned round. In 4 months he had begun to use her name, and she had noticed the day it started and had not remarked on it. Frail files his report on the 19th of April. 6 weeks. If you turn this house upside down now, if you accuse the child's governess of taking Rensham money, and you are wrong, you will hand Sergeant Lyle a countess who dismisses servants on suspicion, in writing, 3 weeks before the report, and he will not need another word from anybody. And if I am right and I wait, she has 6 more weeks in that nursery. 6 weeks in which she has done nothing worse than she has already done. You don't know what she has done. That is what waiting means. Honor heard her own voice go up half a tone and brought it down again. It means agreeing not to know. Wait until the 20th of April, he said. 3 days after the report. Then take the house apart if you like, and I will hold the ladder. It was a reasonable thing to say. It was, she thought afterwards, for a long time afterwards, in a rented room in Leeds, with the traffic going by underneath, the single most reasonable thing anybody had said to her in 5 months. She lay awake that night from about 1 o'clock. She was 31 years old, and she had been a schoolmistress for 4 years and a shopkeeper for 5, And in the whole of that time, she had done exactly one thing she could not put down, and it was not a large thing to look at. She had put her hand on a girl's shoulder in a cold room off Kirkgate, and she had said, "We shall talk about it later." And she had said it because there were 38 other children and a slate lesson and an inspector coming on the Thursday. And every single one of those reasons had been a good one. That was the part nobody understood who had not done it. The reasons had all been good. She had not been lazy or cruel or stupid. She had been sensible, in a room where being sensible cost a child her life, and she had gone on being unable to tell the difference from the inside ever since. Wait until the 20th of April, 3 days after the report. Frail files, the court is satisfied, and then we act. It was the same sentence. It had a different date on it and better tailoring, and it was the same sentence. And Honor lay in the dark at Endersby Hall and heard herself say it in her own voice in a schoolroom in Leeds in March of 1843. And at about 4 in the morning she stopped arguing with herself and began, instead, to make a plan. She got up at 6. She was not tired at all, which should have warned her. The 7th of March was a clear, cold Wednesday with a wind off the moor, and lessons began at 9 as they always did. Honor waited until 11, when Cecily would be at her copybook and the schoolroom door would be shut, and then she went up and stood in the passage outside it and sent the housemaid in to ask Miss Wynne to come out and speak to her. Mr. Frail was at the far end of the passage, at the window seat by the linen press, with his leather book open on his knee. He had been there since 11:15. Honor saw him. She registered him the way one registers a chair. That is the thing she came back to afterwards, more often than any other. Not the list, not the wax, not the 4 words on the scrap of paper. She saw him, and she did not stop. And she did not take the governess downstairs into the morning room and shut the door, which would have taken 40 seconds. Miss Wynne came out with the copybook still in her hand. "Whose letters have you been burning in that grate?" The governess's face did what it always did, which was nothing at all. "I don't understand, your ladyship. Green wax." A sloping hand. "At least 3 times in a fortnight, in the nursery fire and not in your own, and once at 4 in the afternoon with a candle when there was no need of one. I have the corner of one of them in my writing case downstairs." "Whose are they?" "I cannot say." "Cannot or will not?" "I cannot say," said Miss Wynne. "Have you had money from Sir Gideon Rensham?" There was a pause then, and it was the wrong length. It was 3 or 4 seconds long, and in it Miss Wynne looked past Honor's shoulder down the passage, and Honor read that look as the look of a woman calculating what could be proved. "I made a promise to her late ladyship," Miss Wynne said. "I can say nothing more." It was, of all the sentences in the English language, the one most exactly calculated to sound like a confession. Honor heard it as one. Anybody standing in that passage would have heard it as one, and one person was, and he was writing. "You will go to your room," Honor said, "and you will remain in it, and Mrs. Threlfall will be with you, and nothing in it will be moved until Mr. Bardsey has come up. I am sending to Marsden Cross for the constable, and I am writing to Mr. Hesketh at the bench. You have had letters from a party to a suit concerning a ward of the Court of Chancery about that ward, in that ward's own nursery, and you have burnt them. And you will explain it to somebody today if you will not explain it to me." "Very good, my lady," said Miss Wynne. And then she looked past Honor's shoulder again, and this time Honor turned to follow it. Cecily was on the half landing. She was in her indoor shoes, and she had the walnut box under her arm, and she had been there, from the height of the sun on the wall behind her, for some considerable part of it. She was not crying. Her face had the particular blankness that Honor had seen on the first afternoon in October, and had not seen since January. Cecil the child turned and went up the stairs. She did it without hurrying, which was the thing that frightened Honor most in the recollection. And by the time Honor reached the landing, the passage was empty, and the door of Cecily's room stood open on a room with nobody in it, and the west window pushed up 8 inches onto the leads. It was 11:20 in the morning. They found her at 3 o'clock the following morning, 15 hours and 40 minutes. The house and the stables and the home farm, and, by 4 in the afternoon, 30 men from Marsden Cross with lanterns, and Radlett out with them, and Bardsey riding to the toll house at the York Road to have every cart stopped, and Nicholas going through the beech plantation twice in the dark on foot because he would not sit in the house. They dragged the mill dam at 8 in the evening. Honor stood on the bank and watched them do it and did not look away once, because she had decided at about 6 o'clock, walking up Belfold in the dark, that whatever happened tonight, she was not going to be the sort of person who could not look at it. At 2 in the morning, it began to rain. The chapel at the west end of the lawn had been searched at noon and again at 5. It was searched a third time at 3, because Nicholas, coming back across the wet grass for the 4th time, saw that the door was 2 inches out of its frame, and remembered that it warped in wet weather and dropped and could not be pulled quite to from the inside by anybody who did not know to lift it. Cecily was lying on her side on the floor of the aisle on the memorial slab, with the box held against her chest in both arms and her cheek on the stone. She had been there since the middle of the morning. She was soaked through to the shift, and she was very cold, and she had gone past shivering into the flat, slow, agreeable stage that Radlett would not let anybody call sleep. She had scratched the fingers of her right hand raw, getting the box up under her coat where the rain would not get at it. Nicholas knelt down on the slab beside his daughter, and could not for a moment pick her up. It was Honor who lifted her, and Cecily let herself be lifted, and did not put her arms round anybody's neck, and did not say a word from the chapel to the house. Miss Dorcas Wynne resigned her situation at 8 the next morning, in the study, standing, without being asked to. Radlett had come down 20 minutes earlier and said that the child would do, that she was warm and had taken milk, that there was no fever and he did not expect one, and that they had been extremely lucky, and he would say so in writing to anybody who wanted it, which, he added, somebody was going to. Honor asked Miss Wynne to stay. She said it badly, and twice. I would rather go, my lady. Miss Wynne, her ladyship, wrote letters in the autumn before last, said the governess, and I carried them to the post at Marsden Cross myself, because she did not choose to put them in the bag. 9 of them, between September and the end of November. They were to her brother. She asked me not to speak of it, and I gave her my word, and she was alive then, and I am not able to see that her dying alters what I said. Nicholas had gone very still by the desk. Since June of last year, Miss Wynne went on, in the same flat voice. Sir Gideon has written to me 11 times. He asks whether her ladyship left any papers in my keeping. He asks whether the child has anything of her mother's in her own hands. He asks it in 11 different ways. The first 2 I answered, saying that I had nothing, and after that I did not answer at all, because a woman in my position who corresponds with a party to a suit is finished whatever she writes. I burnt them in the nursery because Mrs. Threlfall has the raking of my grate and does not have the raking of that one. I have never in my life had a shilling from Sir Gideon Rensham or from anybody else in his family, and I will swear that in any court in England. Then why in God's name did you not say so yesterday? Said Honor. Miss Wynne looked at her for a moment. Because your ladyship asked me in the passage, she said. She was gone by 11 with a month's wages and no character, in the carrier's cart. Honor sat in the nursery that afternoon while Cecily slept and put the thing together in the cold, and it took her about 10 minutes, and every piece of it had been in front of her since the first week. The child had not gone still when Miss Wynne came into a room because Miss Wynne frightened her. She had gone still because Miss Wynne was the one person in the house who knew there was something to be still about. 15 months of being looked at over the top of a copybook by the only adult who had guessed. The flinch that Honor had written down as the flinch of a child afraid of a servant had been the flinch of a child being reminded, 4 or 5 times a day, of a weight she was trying with her whole small body not to think about. Honor had been right that there was something in that house. She had been comprehensively, catastrophically wrong about where it was. Sergeant Lyle's application was made on the 9th of March. It had been drawn, from its length, within about 48 hours of the 7th, which meant that somebody at Endersby had written to Grangeworth on the day itself, and Honor never troubled to find out who, because by then it did not matter, and because the answer was probably nobody worse than a groom with a cousin. The application was supported by the affidavit of Osmond Frail, court officer, who deposed to the events of the 7th of March in the passage outside the schoolroom, in 19 numbered paragraphs, without one word of comment upon any of them. Master Ewbank made his interim order on the 16th. He made it without hearing the parties, on affidavit, in chambers, in a morning, and it went by the post and was in Nicholas Ardern's hand at Endersby on the 18th. It recited that the ward had been absent from her father's household some 15 hours on the night of the 7th of March, that the occasion of it had been an altercation between the Countess of Thirlstone and a member of the household, conducted within the ward's hearing, that the ward had thereby been exposed to danger of her life in a district in which cholera had been ordered within the 12-month, and that the arrangements at Endersby Hall could not for the present be relied upon. Cecily Ardern was to reside at Grangeworth with Sir Gideon and Lady Augusta Rensham until the hearing of the petition. The hearing of the petition was fixed for the Michaelmas sittings at Lincoln's Inn before the Master. The Michaelmas sittings began on the 2nd of November. On application by both parties, and with regret, the Master's clerk was afterwards able to bring it forward to the 11th of September, 6 months. It had taken the Court of Chancery 9 days to take a child out of a house, and it would take it 6 months to consider whether to put her back, and Honor Sedgley, reading the order over her husband's shoulder in the hall at Endersby, with the long case clock going behind her, understood at last what a kind of machine she had married into. The Grangeworth carriage came on the 20th of March at 10 in the morning. Lady Augusta had written the day before to say that they would come themselves and not send, and that they would not come into the house unless they were asked, and that she was very sorry. It was a good letter. Honor read it twice and could not find one false word in it, and put it in the fire. Cecily came down the stairs at 5 minutes to 10 in her outdoor things, with the walnut box under her arm, and Mrs. Threlfall behind her with the trunk, and stopped in the hall. Nicholas went down on one knee in front of his daughter, and said something to her that Honor did not hear, and Cecily listened to all of it, and then put her hand for a moment on the side of his face, which she had never done, and which took the whole of him apart standing there in his own hall. Then she walked to the door. Honor was at the foot of the stairs, 3 feet from her. She had prepared nothing, having worked out at 4 that morning that anything prepared would be for her own benefit. So she said the only true thing available, "I'll be here." Cecily Ardern went past her, and out of the door and down the steps and got into the carriage, and did not look at her, not once. Not at the door, not on the steps, not from the window as it turned in the drive. Honor stood on the top step in the cold, and watched for the small pale shape at the glass, and it did not come. And the carriage went down between the beeches and out through the gate and turned north, and that was that. She went in and found her husband still in the hall. "Stay," he said. "No honor. This house is yours. You are my wife, whatever else is or is not true between us, and there is no court in England that can put you out of it." And do what in it? She was not angry with him. She had been angry with herself since 3 o'clock on the morning of the 8th, and had run out. "There is one reason I am in this house. Take her out of it, and what is left is a marriage of convenience with no convenience in it. If I sit here in her nursery until September, with her gone, and let it turn into the other thing, into a house and a title and an arrangement between two people who have got used to each other, then in September I shall walk into that court and be exactly what Lyle says I am, and I shall know it, and so will you." That is a very cold way to put it. It is an accurate way to put it. You may have the cold one or a comfortable one. You cannot have both, and you agreed to that in my back room in October. He did not answer for a moment. "Where will you go?" "Leeds." "To what?" "I don't know yet." She picked up her gloves from the hall table. "I want that written down somewhere in case anybody ever asks. I do not know what I am going to. I have £11 and a name I have had for 5 months, and no character from my last situation. And I am going to Leeds because I know the town and because I am not going to sit down in a comfortable chair in the county of Yorkshire for 6 months waiting to be told what happens to that child. Will you write to me?" Honor stopped with one glove on. It was, she thought, the first thing he had asked her for in 5 months. That was for himself. "Yes," she said. She took the 2 o'clock from Marsden Cross and was in Leeds by dark, and took a first-floor room over a chandler's off Briggate at 4 shillings the week, and sat down on the edge of the bed with her bonnet still on while the carts went by underneath. She had promised herself at 26 that she would never again be the adult who waited too long. She had not waited. She had gone up that passage at 11 o'clock in the morning, and she had not waited for 1 hour, and she had been wrong. The first letter came on the 28th of March and was 4 lines long. "Madam, Mr. Frail remains in the house. The court has not discharged him, and he has not asked to go. I am permitted to visit at Grangeworth on the 2nd Tuesday of each month between 2 and 5 o'clock. I shall write to you after the first of them. Thurlestone." Honor read it, standing up in a chandler's shop with her thumb over the seal, and could not have said afterwards what she had wanted it to contain instead. "My lord, thank you. Please tell me what she looks like." "Not how she is. Nobody knows how she is, and I don't want to guess dressed up as news. What does she look like?" "H. Ardern, madame." "She has grown, which I did not expect, and had no reason not to expect. Her hair is done differently and not so tight. She was in the small parlor with a book she was not reading, and stood up when I came in and sat down again when I did. She was civil to me, that is the word. My daughter was civil to me for 3 hours. I asked her whether she was warm enough at night, and she said yes. I asked her nothing else, on your principle, and I sat in the chair by the window with a newspaper for the greater part of 2 hours. At about 4, she came and stood by the arm of it for perhaps a minute, and then went back. Lady Augusta was in the room throughout, by the order, and had the good sense to look out of the window. The box is with her. It was on the table by her chair. They went on like that, at first reports, delivered with the flatness of a man giving evidence, which was still the only voice he entirely trusted. Then, in April, they began to slip. Mr. Frail filed his report on the 19th. "Colton has had sight of it. It is not what I feared, and it is not good. He sets out the arrangements in this house from October to March in 11 pages without a word of praise or blame in any of them, and then he sets out the 7th of March in 19 numbered paragraphs. And any man reading the two together will draw the conclusion Lyle wants him to draw, which is that the arrangements were sound until you made them otherwise. I do not agree with that conclusion. I am obliged to tell you that I cannot at present see how to answer it. I have opened your half hour, again in the nursery, from 6:30 to 7. There is nobody in the room. I am aware of how that must read. I do it because I said I would sit still without expecting anything, and it seems to me that if I only do it when there is a child in the chair, then I never learnt the thing at all. I merely learnt to perform it at her, and honor. In a first-floor room over at Chandler's, with the rushlight and the carts, I have taken work with a stationer in Kirkgate, copying and keeping the day book 3 days a week and my dinner, and I am better at it than the man who had it before me, which he has noticed. It is honest and it is dull, and it leaves me the other 4 days, which is the difficulty and not the blessing. I have walked past the school twice and did not go in. I tell you that because I have been in the habit these 5 years of describing that afternoon to myself in a version where I was brave afterwards, and I was not. Radlett writes that there were 2 cases at Sowerley, and that the vestry says drains and he says Beck. He asks whether the copper is still going at the hall. Please tell me it is. It is T. In the 2nd week of May, he wrote about the pianoforte. I have had the lid up. I did it alone, at 11 at night, which I think you will disapprove of, and I did not have it tuned. The music was still in the seat. On the top of it, there is a piece of Mendelssohn with a date penciled at the head in her hand. The 19th of October 1846, and nothing under it, dated later. I have been trying since March to remember what happened in October of 1846, and I can remember nothing whatever. I have gone through the game book and the estate accounts and my own engagement diary for that autumn. I was in London for 11 days. I bought a horse. There is no entry of any kind that would tell a stranger, or myself, that my wife stopped playing the pianoforte that month and never opened it again for the remaining 16 months of her life. I do not know why I am writing this to you. Honor put that one down on the table and sat looking at it for some time. Because there is nobody else, she wrote back. That is not an insult, and you should not read it as one. There is nobody else because you have spent 20 years being a man to whom nothing is said, and you cannot undo that in a spring by wishing. Write it to me. I am not able to tell you what happened in October of 1846, and neither is anybody now living, and I would rather you ask the question out loud to one person than kept it in the game book. She looked at what she had written and added, before she could think better of it, and you might stop calling me madam. It has been 6 months. The next letter, which came on the 23rd of May, began Honor. She read it through twice for the matter, which concerned the September hearing and Colton's opinion of it, and then she folded it and put it with the others in the tin box that had held her writing paper, and went out and did the marketing and came back and read it a 3rd time. She was aware of what she was doing. She sat down on the edge of the bed with her bonnet still on, in a rented room in Leeds, and put it to herself squarely, in the manner she used on other people, that she was a married woman of 31 who had not been touched by anybody since she was a girl, that she was alone in a strange town with nothing to do 4 days in 7, and that a woman in that position who reads a letter 3 times has no business pretending she does not know why. She did not stop reading them, but she never afterwards allowed herself to say that she had not seen it coming. It came back to Leeds in the last week of May, as Radlett had said it would, and it came the way he had said too. Not in the winter's dribble of one house and then another, but all at once, in the yards. The board opened a house of refuge in a disused warehouse off Kirkgate on the 4th of June, and by the 7th they were advertising for women who could read and would come. And on the 8th, Honor Sedgley walked in and gave her name as Honor Ardern, and did not give any other. She was there 31 days. She did not nurse. What she did was keep the book, names, ages, streets, the hour they came in, the hour they went out, and by which door. She got the water boiled and boiled again when the boy let it go off. And she pinned on the wall in a large, clear hand the 4 things Radlett had told her in her own hall in December, and said them to every family through the door until the surgeon began saying them too. Nobody told her she was outside the ordinary province of her sex. There was nobody left to say it. Ellen Marsh was 10 years old and came in on the 19th of June at 8:20 in the morning from the boot and shoe yard, carried by a neighbor because her mother was already in the 3rd room, and her father was at the tannery and did not know. Honor had her in a bed within 4 minutes. She had the water in her within 6. She sent the boy for the surgeon, and when the boy was slow, she went herself and brought him by the sleeve. And she did every single thing that anybody then living in England knew how to do. And she did all of it fast, and she did not wait 1 minute for anything. Ellen Marsh died at 10 minutes to 2 in the afternoon, with her head in Honor's lap. Honor sat on the floor by that bed for perhaps a quarter of an hour afterwards, which she could not afford and took anyway. And it was there in a warehouse off Kirkgate with lime in the air and a queue at the door that the thing came apart in her hands. She had not waited. That was the whole of it. She had had the child in a bed in 4 minutes, and the child was dead in 5 hours and a half. And the promise Honor Sedgley had made to herself in the summer of 1843, and had kept like a religion for 6 years, had not saved anybody at all, which meant that it had never been a promise about children. She had told herself for 6 years that she had left the school because she could not be trusted, and that everything since the shop, the quiet, the marriage, the list, the passage outside the schoolroom on the 7th of March had been the conduct of a woman making sure that no child ever waited for her again. It had not been. It had been the conduct of a woman making sure that she never again had to feel what she had felt at that inquest. Those are not the same, and they only look the same from the inside, and they come apart in exactly one place. They come apart in the moment when acting fast is for you. She got up off the floor and washed and went back to the book because there were 19 people in that room and the book still had to be kept. Miss Philippa Ward came on the 28th of June with 2 members of the board and stayed behind after they had gone. She was about 44, small, very plainly dressed, with the manner of a woman who has spent 20 years being polite to committees and has stopped enjoying it. "You are Honor Sedgley," she said. "I was. You gave evidence to Mr. Horner's people in the summer of 1847 about Hebleroyd's mill at Sowerley, the relays. 2 girls of 11 working a 14-hour span by moving them between 3 shifts, and a time book kept in 2 colors of ink. I did. Your name was in the Mercury on the 12th of August. I cut it out." Miss Ward sat down on the end of a bench without being asked. "I have been looking for you for 2 years, in a mild way, in the manner in which one looks for things one has no time for. I did not expect to find you in a limehouse counting the dead in Kirkgate, and I certainly did not expect to be told at the door that you are a countess. I am. It is a long story, and it is not a romantic one." "I am not interested in it," said Miss Ward, "which I hope you will find restful. I am opening a school for girls at Islington in the January. 300 subscribers, a freehold, and a committee I have already beaten into shape. I want a superintendent, and I have interviewed 11 women, and not one of them would last a year, because what I need is not a lady who is fond of children. What I need is somebody who will stand in front of a board of gentlemen and say a true thing that will cost her, and go on standing there." She named a salary, It was 90 pounds in the house. Honor said nothing for a moment. You know that I am party to a suit in Chancery concerning a child. I have been told. It is heard on the 11th of September. If it goes for us, she comes back to Endersby, and I will be there. And if it goes against you, said Miss Ward, you will have given 11 months to one child and lost her. And you may come to Islington in the January and give the rest of your life to 200. And I put it to you plainly, Lady Thirlstone, because you look to me like a woman who has had a great deal of comfort talked at her lately and could do with a piece of arithmetic instead. It was, Honor thought, the strongest argument anybody had made to her in a year. That was the trouble with it. It was not a temptation. It was not a soft cushioned exit dressed up in gold. It was a good, hard, honorable life's work offered by a woman who was not flattering her, and it would use every single thing she had. Give me 3 weeks, she said. Take 4, said Miss Ward. I do not want an answer from anybody who can give me one this afternoon. Nicholas came to Leeds on the 2nd of July, which was not the second Tuesday of anything. He found the chandler's shop and was told the first floor, and stood on a landing that smelt of tallow and knocked at a door with his hat in his hand for the second time in his life. The room was 10 feet by 12. There was a bed, a table, 1 chair, a tin box on the table with letters in it, and his wife, who had been asleep for 4 hours out of the last 30 and looked it. She gave him the chair and sat on the bed. He had rehearsed it in the carriage from York, and none of the rehearsal survived the sight of the room, so he did it the only way he was able to do anything, which was flatly and in order. You asked me in October what the circumstances of my wife's death were, and I told you it was an old sadness. It was not true. I want to say first that I am not telling you now because it has become convenient. I am telling you because Colton is of opinion that Lyle will open it on the 11th of September, and you would then have heard it in a room at Lincoln's Inn from a man being paid to use it. And I have found that I cannot let that happen and go on thinking of myself as any particular kind of man. Say it. Isabel did not die of a fever. He looked at the table. She died by her own hand, in the small hours of the 19th of February last year, in her own room, and I found her at 7 in the morning. Honor did not move. There was an inquest at the Black Bull on the 21st. It sat 4 hours. Under the law as it stands, a verdict of felo de se means she's not buried in consecrated ground, and it means it is said out loud in a public room in front of 13 men from Marsden Cross. And it means my daughter grows up in a county where every woman she is ever introduced to knows it. He turned his hat once in his hands. I went to the coroner 2 days before. I spoke to 4 of the jury. Where money was of use, I used it. There is no delicate way of saying that, and I am not going to attempt one. The verdict returned was that the deceased destroyed herself while in a state of temporary insanity, which is the verdict that is returned in 9 cases out of 10, and it was returned in 11 minutes. And she was buried in the chapel on the 24th, with the whole of the service read over her. And on the file of the coroner of this writing, said Honor slowly, there is a paper with your wife's name on it and the word insanity. Yes, which is what Lyle put on the table in York in October and did not pick up again. Yes, and which he will pick up in September and use to say what, precisely? Say it in his words, not yours. That the mother of this child destroyed herself while insane. That such a taint is known to run in blood. That the child has already, at 7, exhibited a silence for which 4 medical men could find no bodily cause. And that the household in which she has been placed is presided over by a woman who married her father in a night, and who conducts herself in the manner disclosed by paragraphs 1 to 19 of Mr. Frale's report. Nicholas set his hat down on the table. He will not say she is mad. He will say the word twice and leave it in the room, and the master will write it down. Honor got up and went to the window, which had 4 panes, and looked at a wall. "You will not ask me the other question," Nicholas said, "so I shall ask it for you. Why did I not tell you in your back room in October, when you sat across a table from me and said, 'All of it'?" "Yes," said Honor. "Ask yourself that." "Because you set out 5 conditions," he said. "And by the 3rd of them I had understood what kind of woman I had come to. And I knew that if I told you that my wife had been ill for 16 months in a house I was living in, and that I had answered it by sending to London for men, and that she had died 40 feet from my bedroom door, you would not have married me." "You are wrong. I do not think I am." "You are wrong," said Honor, still at the window. "And it does not matter in the least whether you are, because you did not ask me. And you made the calculation on my behalf, and you kept the answer. And I walked into York at 11 o'clock the next morning with half a story in my hand, and Sergeant Lyle sat 6 feet from me and said the word circumstances, and I had no idea what he meant. You let me go into that room disarmed. You have let me stand in front of a court twice now, not knowing the thing that everybody else in it knew. Yes, that was the first condition, not the 5th. The first, I know what it was." He stood up. "I am not going to tell you I am sorry, because I have thought about it every day since October, and I would do it again. I chose my daughter over being honest with you. If I were sitting in your back room tonight with the license in my pocket and a hearing at 11, I would choose the same. But you are entitled to know that I chose. That is the whole of what I came to Leeds to say, and I have said it, and I will go." "Sit down," said Honor. He did not sit down, Nicholas. "Sit down. I have something to tell you, and I would rather not tell it to a man standing by a door." She told him about Sarah Coyne. She had told the outline of it once, in October, in about 4 sentences, as a reason. This time she told it properly, in the small, hot room with the noise of brigade coming up through the floor, the mark on the girl's face and the color of it, that she had known within 2 seconds and not suspected, the 38 other children, the slate lesson, the inspector expected on the Thursday, the exact words she had used, and the fact that her hand had been on the child's shoulder when she said them. The Friday, the Tuesday after, the parlor of a public house, and a surgeon saying neglect, and 13 men saying accident in under 4 minutes, and Honor, Sedgley aged 26, sitting at the back not being called. "I left in the June," she said. "And for 6 years I have given people a reason for that, and I gave it to you in October. And the reason is that I could not be trusted in front of a frightened child. That is not why." "Then why?" "Because I could not bear to feel that again." She had her hands flat on her knees. "That is all it was, not the child, not the school. That, the thing in the chest, at the inquest, when the surgeon said the word. I could not undergo it a second time, and everything I have done since has been the arrangement of a life in which I would not have to. That is a hard construction to put on yourself. It is the correct one, and I did not arrive at it by being hard on myself. I arrived at it on the 19th of June on the floor of a warehouse in Kirkgate." She told him about Ellen Marsh, the 4 minutes, the 6 minutes, the surgeon fetched by the sleeve, and 10 minutes to 2 in the afternoon. "I did not wait. I have never in my life acted faster or better, and she died anyway. And it took me about a quarter of an hour on that floor to understand what my great vow has actually been for 6 years. Which is what? A guarantee against my own feelings, worn on the outside as a virtue." Honor looked up at him. "Now, put that beside the 7th of March, and tell me what happened in that passage." Nicholas did not answer. "I will tell you," she said. "I had a list of facts. Every fact on it was true, and I was right that there was something wrong in that house. And I stood in a passage at 11 o'clock in the morning, in front of a court officer, within hearing of that child, and put it to a servant in a way that could not be taken back when I could have walked 40 feet, shut a door, and asked her the same 8 questions in a room, 40 feet. There is no argument in the world for not walking 40 feet. You were afraid for Cecily? No. She said it quite steadily. That is the kind thing, and it is not true, and I have had 4 months to look at it. On the 7th of March, I was not saving Cecily Ardern. I was saving Sarah Coyne. I had a chance to be the woman who did not wait. At last, 6 years late, and I took it. And the child in the case was, I am going to say this exactly, the child in the case was the occasion of it. I used your daughter to settle a debt of mine. The room was quiet. Down in the street, a cart went over the sets. So we are level, Nicholas said at last. I don't know that it is a competition. It is not. I mean that I have spent 3 months believing you had every right to be in that house, and I had none. I found that easier than the alternative, because it required nothing of me except shame, and I am well practiced at shame. He sat down at last, on the chair, heavily. I hired 4 men to mend my wife, and she died, and last November I began hiring men to mend my daughter, and when you told me in the study what I was doing, I did not know it. I want you to understand that. I did not know it. Not until you said it, in the study in December. I know. How? Because a man who knows does not do it twice. They sat a while. I have been offered a school, said Honor. She told him about it plainly. Islington, the January, 300 subscribers, £90 and the house, and a woman who was not flattering her. She did not soften the arithmetic, and she did not put a single thumb on the scale. It is a good offer, said Nicholas. It is the best offer I shall ever have. He looked at his hands for a moment. Then he said, You should take it. I know that I should, said Honor. You may go now. There is a train at 7. He went at 7. On the 14th of July, which was a Saturday, Honor Sedgley wrote to Miss Philippa Ward and thanked her, and declined the superintendency of the school at Islington, and gave one reason, which was that she was not free. She walked to the post office in Brigate and put it in herself. She did not write to Endersby about it. She did not write to Miss Ward's committee, or to Colton, or to anybody at all. And when the answer came back 3 lines, regretting it, and saying that the offer would stand until the 1st of December, and not 1 day after she put that in the tin box with the rest, and told nobody about that either. There was a reason, and she was clear-eyed about it. If she was going to be in that house in September, she wanted it to be a thing she had chosen in a rented room in July with nobody watching, and not an answer she had given to a man who asked her. At Grangeworth there were 4 horses, and Cecily was allowed to ride the gray one, and there was a boy called Tom, who came from the rectory on Wednesdays and could walk on his hands. And there was a bell in her room she could ring if she wanted anything at night. Her Aunt Augusta was kind. That is the true word, and Cecily never found another one for it then or afterwards. She was kind at breakfast, and kind at the stables and kind in the evening, and she never once said cheer up, and when Cecily did not want to answer something, she let it go by like a person stepping over a puddle without looking down at it. The difficulty was that nobody there said her mother's name. Not once, not in 11 weeks. There were 3 people at that table, and a houseful of servants, and a bell she could ring. And the word Isabel was not spoken in her hearing between the 20th of March and the end of the summer, and neither was your mother. And neither was when she was a girl, which was the thing her aunt had done on the hearth-rug at Endersby in February, and had not done since. In the morning room there had been a small oval portrait of a fair girl of about 14 in a white dress over the writing table, and Cecily had found it in the first week, and had got into the way of going and standing in front of it in the half-hour before dinner. In the 3rd week it was not there. She did not ask where it had gone. She understood perfectly well where it had gone and why. and she understood that it had been done kindly, and that was the whole of the thing that was the matter with Grangeworth, and she was 8 years old and had no words for it at all. She had words for it later. What she thought at the time was simply, "They have taken her out of the room so that I shall not be sad." And then, underneath that, "In the place where the real thoughts are, so I am to be the only one who has her." Her birthday was the 4th of May, and she was 8. There was a cake, and candles, and 12 people, and a pony trap ride in the morning. And her uncle gave her a workbox with her initials on it in brass, and her aunt gave her a canary in a cage. And everybody was very good to her all day long. Nobody said her mother's name. Cecily sat at the middle of the table, with the candles in front of her, and waited through the whole of it, through the health and the clapping. And Tom from the rectory being made to sing for one person, any person, to say she would have been so proud of you, or she was 8 once too, or anything at all, with her mother's name in the middle of it. It would have taken 4 seconds. She had it ready in her head, the answer she would give, in case somebody did. Nobody did. They had all agreed not to. She could see them agreeing not to all day, with their eyes across her head. That night she got into bed and did not cry, and could not think why she felt as though something had been stolen out of the house. Her Uncle Gideon asked her about the box 6 times between March and July. He never once demanded it. He sat down beside her, on the step by the sundial or on the end of the bed, and he talked to her about her mother, which nobody else in that house would do, and which was the reason she let him. And at the end of it he would say gently that if her mother had left any papers with her, he would take great care of them, because there had been letters between him and her mother that he had not answered as he ought, and he should like to have them safe. He always said it kindly, and he always said it as though it cost him something, and it did. And every time Cecily looked at the ground and said nothing, because she had made a promise, and because there was a part of her that had begun to notice slowly, the way you notice a smell in a house, that of all the things her uncle said about her mother, the only one he ever came back to was the letters. She stopped eating properly at the beginning of June, and nobody could make out why, and a doctor came from Ripon and found nothing. By the 3rd week of July she had stopped speaking altogether. Not one word to her aunt, not one to her uncle, not one to Tom from the rectory, who came on Wednesdays for a while and then stopped coming. On the 29th of July, Lady Augusta Wrensham went up to her own room after dinner and locked the door, and wrote a letter to the Countess of Thirlstone at an address she had got by asking her husband's solicitor a question she had no business asking, and sent it out by a servant of her own to the post at Ripon and not at the village. It was 3 lines long. "Madam, she is not growing here. She is waiting. I do not know for whom, but it is not for us." A.R. Lady Augusta's 3 lines reached Leeds on the 1st of August. Honor read them twice, and then sat for about 10 minutes, doing nothing at all, which was not her habit, and what she was doing in those 10 minutes was going back through every single thing she thought she knew, and taking the weight off it. She is waiting. I do not know for whom, but it is not for us. She had been telling herself since March that the child had at least gone somewhere warm. It had been the one consoling sentence available, and she had used it a great deal. And a woman with no reason on earth to be kind to her had just taken it away. She gave notice at the stationer's the same afternoon. On the 2nd, she went to a jeweler in Brigate and sold her watch, which had been her mother's and was the only thing of value she had ever owned, and got £4.15 for it, with £11.5 saved out of her wages that made £16 exactly, which she counted twice on the bed and put into a leather bag. Then she took the train to York and asked at the diocesan registry, and at 2-day schools, and at the 3rd She was told that a Miss Wynne taught arithmetic 4 mornings a week and lodged with her married sister in a court off Goodramgate. She got there at 6 in the evening on the 3rd of August. Dorcas Wynne opened the door herself and looked at her without any expression whatever. "I have come to say 4 things," said Honor on the step, "and then I shall go. And if you shut the door now, I shall not knock again." "May I say them here?" "You may come in." The room was smaller than the one in Leeds and much cleaner. There was no fire, and no need of one. Miss Wynne did not sit down and did not offer a chair, and Honor stood with her bag in her hand and said it. "The first is that on the 7th of March I accused you, in a passage, within hearing of a court officer and of the child, of taking money from Sir Gideon Rensham. It was not true. I had no evidence that it was true. I had a number of facts that were true and an inference that was mine, and I put the inference to you as though it were established. And I did it where I did it because I was in a hurry to be a certain kind of woman. That is the whole of the reason. There was no better one." Miss Wynne said nothing. "The second is this." Honor put the bag on the table. "There is £16 there. It is 6 months of your wages at the rate you were paid at Endersby. It is not compensation, because I cannot compensate you. And it is not an apology, because an apology that arrives with money in it is a purchase. It is a debt. I dismissed you in a manner that cost you your situation and your character, and I am paying what I can of what that cost. And it is every shilling I have in the world, which I mention only so that you will not think it came out of his lordship's pocket, because it did not. And the third?" Honor took a folded paper from her sleeve and laid it beside the bag. "That is a character, over my signature, in my own name and title. It says that you were 4 years in the household of the Earl of Thirlstone, that you had the entire care of his daughter's education, that you were dismissed upon a charge which the Countess of Thirlstone made in error, and now withdraws in writing, and that any lady requiring further particulars may write to me at Endersby Hall and will receive them." She straightened. "It will be read by everybody you show it to. My name will be on it. I am aware of what that is worth and what it costs, and it is the smaller half of the two." There was a long pause. Miss Wynne had put her hand on the back of a chair. "You said 4. The 4th is not for me. The child is at Grangeworth. She has stopped speaking altogether, and she has stopped eating, and there is a hearing on the 11th of September, and I am not here to ask you for anything. And I want you to understand before you answer that I would have come and said the first 3, whatever the 4th was." "I know that," said Miss Wynne. "You would not have brought the money if you had come to trade with it." She sat down. "I told his lordship in March that I carried 9 letters to the post," she said. That was true, and it was not the whole. Her ladyship kept fair copies of everything she wrote. She had done it since she was a girl, in a green book, and it was a joke in the family that you could not get away with anything you had written to Isabel Rensham. She copied all 9 of those into the book. I know because I saw her do the last of them. Where is the book? Gone. It was in her dressing room, and it went in the spring with the rest of the papers. And I have thought since that it went into a fire, and I do not know whose. Then there was one she copied twice. Miss Wynne was looking at the empty grate, the last one, in the end of November. She copied it into the book, and then she copied it again on a separate sheet, both sides, and she folded it in 4, and she did not put it in the book. That was on the 29th of November, and I came in with the lamps, and she put her hand over it, and I never saw it again, and I never asked. Honor said, very carefully, "Did you ever see it after? In anybody's hands?" "No," said Miss Wynne. "But when they took her ladyship's things out in the spring, I was in that room for 4 hours with Mrs. Threlfall, and there was no folded paper in it, and there was no green book either. 20 months earlier, In a counting house in Mark Lane, Sir Gideon Rensham had sat with his hat on the desk in front of him and worked out that he was ruined. He had bought wheat in the spring of 1847 as half the trade bought it, when it went to 102 shillings. The quarter and the Irish orders came faster than the ships, and like half the trade he had bought on paper and gone on buying after the good harvest was already in the ground. By the end of August, it was under 60. By the middle of September, it was under 50. The bills fell due in October, and on the 18th, Rensham and Company suspended payment, along with a great many older houses than his. He was not made bankrupt. That was the thing he had bought, at the price of Grangeworth's timber and his wife's settlement, and 9 months of standing in front of men in rooms with his hat in his hand. He was not made bankrupt, and it did not get into the papers under his own name, and in the county of Yorkshire, nobody knew. The letters from his sister began in the September. There were 9 of them, and they came to his London address, and he read every one. She did not ask him for money. She asked him to come. She asked him, in the 4th, to take her and the child away to Grangeworth for the winter. And in the 7th, she wrote something about her husband's house that he did not then believe and could not afterwards forget. And in the 9th, at the end of November, she wrote that she did not think she could get through another winter in it, and asked him to send 1 line by return. He did not answer any of them. He told himself at the time that it was a fit of nerves, and that Isabel had always been highly strung, and that a man with 3 writs out against him has nothing whatever to give anybody, and that he would go up to Endersby in the spring when the thing was settled and see to it properly then. The word that he did not use, sitting in Mark Lane in the winter of 1847, with his sister's 9th letter in the drawer, was that he could not afford to be seen going into Yorkshire in a hurry, because a man whose paper is being watched cannot afford to be seen doing anything in a hurry at all. She died on the 19th of February. He went up for the funeral and stood at the graveside and understood, with the coffin going down, that there existed somewhere in that house 9 letters in his sister's hand asking her brother for help, and a green book with fair copies of all of them in it, and that if any of it were ever read by anybody, he would be, for the remainder of his life, the man who had not answered. Honor wrote to Colton from York on the 4th of August, and had his answer on the 9th. Madam, your surmise is correct, and it took my clerk one afternoon at the Guildhall, Rensham & Co., corn factors, of Mark Lane. Suspended payment on 18 October 1847, and resumed in the June, following upon an arrangement with the creditors. There was no fiat. The name did not appear in the Gazette. Sir Gideon's private circumstances are, I am told, considerably restored, but not what they were. I do not at present see how it assists us. It shows he was pressed for money in 1847. It does not show he wants money now, and a master will say rightly that a gentleman's embarrassment 2 years since is no reason to refuse him his niece. Honor read that twice and did not agree with a word of it. Colton was looking for a motive of money, because money is what solicitors look for. But a man who wants money does not spend 18 months and £300 in costs on a child whose fortune is tied up in chancery and will stay there. And a man who wants a child does not, 6 times in 5 months, sit down beside her on the step by a sundial and ask her, kindly, whether her mother left her any papers. He did not know where the copies were. That was the whole of it. He had not found the green book, or he had found it and burnt it, and still could not be certain it was the only one, and there was a child of 8 somewhere with her mother's things in a locked box, and he could not get at the truth of it from Grangeworth, and there was exactly one arrangement in the world under which he could open every drawer that girl owned and ask her every day for the rest of her childhood. He was not fighting for his sister's daughter. He was fighting for the paper that said he had not answered his sister. She went back to Endersby on the 11th of August because the case had to be got ready, and it could not be got ready from a room over at Chandler's. The house had a smell of empty in it that had not been there in October, which was absurd since it had been emptier then. Mr. Frail was still in the blue room. He rose when she came into the hall and bowed, and said that he hoped her ladyship was well, and went back up. And Honor thought, he has been in this house 10 months, and I have never once asked him a question about himself. Mr. Colton came out from York on the 16th with a junior and a bag of papers, and spent 4 hours going through it, and at the end of the 4 hours he took off his spectacles and made his recommendation. You will forgive me for putting it baldly. The master has read 19 paragraphs about the 7th of March, and he has read nothing whatever about the other 360 days. What he has not got is a picture. If your lordship and her ladyship were to be seen at the church at Marsden Cross, at the assize ball, driving out, and if there were, when the child is brought into court, some natural gesture between the three of you. No, said Honor. My lady, I am not proposing anything false. You are proposing that I take that child's hand in a room at Lincoln's Inn in front of a master in Chancery, because it will look well. Honor put her palm flat on the table. I made 5 conditions in a back room in Marsden Cross in October, and the 5th of them was that there would be no performance of affection for that child's benefit. It was the last one I said, and I nearly did not say it, because I thought it was the one least likely to be needed. Mr. Colton, if I win her back with a piece of theater in September, then I have taught her in one afternoon that the adults do it too, and everything I have said to her since October becomes a thing I said until it was inconvenient. Colton looked at Nicholas. You have my wife's answer, Nicholas said. My lord, with respect, you have my wife's answer, Colton, and it is mine, and you will not raise it again. He said it pleasantly enough. Take the picture out of your bag. What is left? What was left was Miss Wynne. It was Nicholas who wanted it, and he wanted it hard, and they had it out that evening in the study with the windows open on a hot night. She will swear to 9 letters, he said. 9, carried to the post by hand because Isabel would not put them in the bag, in the autumn of '47, to that man, and not one of them answered. Put Dorcas Wynne in that room, and Lyle's client stops being the grieving uncle before the master has finished writing down her name. Yes, said Honor, he does. Then.
And the first question Lyle asks her on cross-examination is, Miss Wynne, do you know what was in those letters? And she says no.
And he says, then you cannot tell this court whether the late countess was asking her brother for a loan, or for a visit, or for anything at all, can you? And she says no. And then he says, but you can tell us, can you not, what her ladyship's state of mind was in the autumn of 1847? And she is on oath, Nicholas, and she is the most truthful woman I have ever met in my life, and she will answer him. Nicholas did not move. And when she has answered him, Honor said, Lyle will have got the mother's mind into evidence out of the mouth of our own witness, and he will not have had to open the coroner's file at all, because we shall have opened it for him. We are trying to keep one word out of that room. The moment we put Miss Wynne in the box, we put it in ourselves and hand him the pen. So we say nothing. He turned from the window. We go into Lincoln's Inn on the 11th of September, and we say nothing at all about a man who left 9 letters in a drawer, because saying it might be awkward. I did not say we say nothing. I said we do not do it through her. Then through what? I don't know yet, said Honor. That is not an answer. No, she agreed. It is not. They stood on either side of the desk in the hot room and did not resolve it, and did not pretend to, and went up separately. It was the first serious quarrel of their marriage, and Honor lay awake afterwards thinking that it was in some way a better thing than the 10 months of agreement that had gone before, and could not have said why, and was too tired to work it out. On the 26th of August, Radlett wrote from Marsden Cross that there were 19 dead at Ripon in 8 days and 11 in the villages north of it, and that the Ripon district included the parish in which Grangeworth stood, and that if her ladyship were minded to do anything foolish, she should do it before the first week of September, when he expected it to be at its worst. She went on the 29th, with no leave from the court, and she knew exactly what it would cost. An interim order of the Court of Chancery is not a suggestion. The ward was at Grangeworth by the direction of the master, and the wife of the party against whom that order had been made had no business whatever presenting herself at the door, and Sergeant Lyle would put it in an affidavit within the week, and would be entitled to. She took the train to Ripon and walked the last 4 miles, because there was no fly to be had, and it was the 29th of August, and the hedges were white with dust. And she went up the Grangeworth Drive at 3:30 in the afternoon, in a gray dress, with the dust on it to the knee. Lady Augusta was in the hall. They looked at one another for a moment across a good deal of black and white marble. "Sir Gideon is at Ripon until 6, said Lady Augusta. "I did not come to see Sir Gideon." "No." Her hands were folded in front of her and quite steady. "Lady Thirlstone, I want to say one thing before anything else happens, and I want it understood. I have not changed sides. My husband is my husband, and I believe him to be a good man in a great deal of pain, and I will not have it said that I was worked upon by you or by anybody. Everything I have done since the 29th of July I have done on my own account, and I will say so to his face if it comes to that. I never supposed otherwise. Then we understand each other." She turned. "She is in the nursery on the 2nd floor, the 3rd door. I am going to walk to the end of this passage and look out of the window at the park, which I do most afternoons, and I am not going to hear anything." The room was pleasant. That was the horror of it. It had a good carpet and a fire laid, though it was August, and a canary in a cage by the window that was not singing, and a shelf of books, and every single thing in it had been chosen by somebody trying to be kind. Cecily Ardern was in the window seat with the walnut box beside her. She had grown, as her father had said, and she had got thin in a way that had nothing to do with growing. And when the door opened, she turned her head and saw Honor, and her face did not change at all. Honor did not go across and kneel down. She had thought about that on the 4 miles from Ripon and had decided against it, because kneeling down in front of a child is a thing you do when you want something from her. She sat on the floor just inside the door, with her back against the wall, in the dust of the road, at the greatest distance in the room. "I have not come to take you anywhere," she said. "I have no right to be in this house, and I shall be gone before your uncle is back. And if you would like me to go now, I will go now." Cecily did not answer. "Then I am going to say the thing I came to say, and then I am going to be quiet. And you needn't say anything at all, today or ever." She said it looking at the carpet, because it was easier, and because a child does not need to be stared at while she is being told something. "On the 7th of March, I stood in the passage outside your schoolroom, and I said out loud that Miss Wynne had taken money from your uncle. It was not true. She had never taken a farthing from anybody. She had made a promise to your mother, and she kept it right up until they put her in the carrier's cart, and I was the one who put her there." The canary moved on its perch. "I did not say it because I knew. I said it because I was frightened. There was a girl called Sarah Coyne, 6 years ago, when I was a school mistress, and she was 11, and she needed me to do something, and I told her we would talk about it later, and she died. I have been afraid ever since of being that woman again, And on the 7th of March, I was in such a hurry not to be her that I did not stop to be right. She stopped. And I said it 40 feet from a door I could have shut. And I said it in a place where you could hear it. That is the part I am sorriest for, and it is the part I have the least excuse for. Because I promised your father in October that you would never be handed a lie. And I never once thought to promise that you would not be handed the truth like that. Nothing. The clock on the landing outside. I have not come to be forgiven, said Honor. I would like it, and I have no claim to it. And if you never give it to me, that is a fair account, and I shall not think less of you for a moment. I came so that you would hear me say it out of my own mouth, because you are 8 years old, and everybody in this business has been talking over your head since June of last year, and I would rather be the one who did not. She stopped talking. She sat on the floor by the door with her back against the wall and her hands in her lap, and did not say anything else, and did not look up, and let the silence be the child's to do what she liked with. It went on a long time, long enough that Honor's foot went numb, and she did not shift it. Then there was the sound of a small key. Cecily had the box open on her knees. She took out a folded paper, soft along the creases, and got down off the window seat and crossed the whole length of that pleasant, well-carpeted, well-meaning room, and stood in front of Honor and held it out. "You keep it for me," she said, 9 words. It was the longest sentence Cecily Ardern had spoken to anybody since the 19th of February in the year before last, and she had walked the length of the room to say it. Honor took the paper. She did not open it. "I will keep it," she said, "until you ask me for it back. It is not mine, and it does not become mine by being in my hand. Do you understand me? It is yours, and I am carrying it." Cecily nodded once. Then she stood there a second longer and said, "You have got dust on you." "I walked from Ripon." "Oh," said Cecily, and went back to the window seat. Honor read the letter on the 4 miles into Ripon, standing still in the road twice, and then folded it back along its own creases and put it inside her dress against her stays, and walked the rest of the way to the station in the dark. Master Ewbank sat in the 11th of September in a room at Lincoln's Inn with the windows shut against the smell of the town, and the town that September was very bad indeed. Sergeant Lyle opened for the petitioners and took 2 hours, and did not raise his voice once. He began with Leeds. Lady Thirlstone was for 4 years, under the name of Honor Sedgley, an assistant in a ragged school off Kirkgate in that town. In March of 1843, a scholar of hers, a girl of 11 named Sarah Coyne, attended that school with an injury to the face. She spoke of it to Miss Sedgley. Miss Sedgley made no report to the master of the school, no report to any relieving officer, and no inquiry of any kind. The child did not attend again. She was dead within the fortnight, and there was an inquest, and Miss Sedgley was present at that inquest and gave no evidence. He turned a page. In August of 1847, the same lady gave information against a manufacturer of this county to one of Her Majesty's inspectors, and her name was printed in a newspaper, and I make no complaint of it whatever, except this: it establishes that the lady is perfectly capable of speaking when she judges it right to speak. The court is therefore not dealing with a timid woman. It is dealing with a woman of decided opinions who has, on one occasion in her life which we know of, held her tongue about a child in danger, and on another occasion, on the 7th of March last, spoken about one in a manner which I shall come to. He came to the 7th of March and took 40 minutes over 19 paragraphs, and then at 12:30, he said that he was obliged with great reluctance to refer the court to the file of the coroner for the West Riding for the year 1848, and he said the word twice, in 2 different sentences, and left it in the room. Honor sat with her hands in her lap and looked at him while he did it. Colton rose at 2. He had got no further than the 4th sentence of his opening when Nicholas Ardern stood up beside him. "Sir, may I say something to the court?" Master Ewbank looked at him for a moment. "Your counsel is addressing me, Lord Thirlstone." "He is and he will, and I ask the court's pardon for 1 minute." Nicholas was holding a single sheet of paper, and he did not look at it. "It has been suggested in this matter, since June of last year, that my interest in my daughter's residence is connected with her mother's settlement, of which I take the income during her minority. I wish to renounce it. All of it, from Lady Day last, absolutely and without condition. Whatever this court decides today, and whichever way it decides, I ask that a receiver be appointed by this court, independent of me and of Sir Gideon Rensham, both, and that no part of the income of that settlement ever come into my hands again." There was a silence of some length. "You understand," said Master Ewbank, "that if the order sought by the petitioners is made, your daughter will go to Grangeworth, and you will have divested yourself of every farthing." "Yes. That is a considerable thing to do at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, my lord. It is a considerable thing to have been said about me for 15 months, sir," said Nicholas, and sat down. Sergeant Lyle looked at the paper for rather a long time, and then called Osmond Frail. He called him because Frail was his best witness and always had been. 19 numbered paragraphs. Deposed by an officer of the court who had no interest in the outcome, and Lyle took him through them in 20 minutes and got every one of them confirmed exactly as written. "Thank you, Mr. Frail. Nothing further." Colton, who had been given no notice of anything and had nothing to ask, half rose. "I have no questions for this witness." "Mr. Frail," said Master Ewbank, "you may stand down." Frail did not stand down. He stood in the box with his leather book held against his chest in both hands. "Sir, I beg your pardon. Am I permitted to say a thing that has not been asked of me?" "You are an officer of this court, Mr. Frail. You may say anything you believe I ought to hear." "Then I should like the court to know that I remained at Endersby Hall after my report was filed on the 19th of April, and that I have been in that house ever since because I was not discharged and did not ask to be." He was looking at the wall over the master's head. "I was in that house for 5 months after the child was taken out of it. I have made my report of the year before, and it stands, and I withdraw no part of it. I have observed everything in it faithfully, and I do not say a word about what any of it means, because that is not my office. I say only this. Between October and March, I wrote down a household in which a great deal happened. Since the 20th of March, I have had nothing whatever to write down. The house is quiet. It is not peaceful. It is quiet. I have kept a book in that house for 11 months, and that is the single observation I wish to make to the court. And I make it because nobody has asked me for it, and I do not think anybody is going to." He put the book under his arm and stepped down. At the adjournment, Honor found Sir Gideon Rensham alone at the end of the corridor by the window, and went to him and took the folded paper out of her sleeve. "Don't take it," she said, when he put out his hand. "Read it here." He read it standing up both sides, and Honor watched a man of 46 read his sister's handwriting for the first time in 22 months. When he had finished, he did not give it back. He held it and looked out of the window at the court below. "There were 9, he said. "I know. She copied that one twice and gave the copy to a child of 6, and told her to keep it and tell nobody, and told her that if she told, they would take her away." Honor's voice was not unkind. "Your sister was very ill by the end of November, Sir Gideon. She did not do that to arm anybody against you. She did it because she was frightened, and it was the last thing she had written, and she gave her daughter the only thing she had, and she put a terror on it because she was not well. And your niece has carried it for 22 months without once telling a living soul, including you. Gideon Rensham said nothing. Now hear what I have come to say, because I have 4 minutes and it is an offer and not a threat, and I want the difference on the record between us, even if it is nowhere else. She took the paper back out of his fingers, gently. Withdraw the petition. Today, this afternoon, on any terms you like as to costs. And this letter goes into a sealed cover with your name on it, and Mr. Colton's seal, into his strong room, and is delivered to Cecily Ardern on her 21st birthday, and to nobody else in the meantime. Not read in this court, not shown to the master, not read by me again, and not by your wife, and not by her father. You would be handing away your case. I have already handed it away. I could have given that to Colton on the 30th of August, and he would have had you out of this building by Wednesday. She folded it. I am not going to. Not because I am a better woman than you. You may take it from me that I am not, but because there is no way to put that letter in front of the master without putting your sister's mind in front of him, and if I do that to keep her daughter, then I have spent that child's mother to buy her, and she will be 21 one day, and she will read the transcript. And if I refuse, then it goes in the strong room anyway, said Honor. That is what makes it an offer. It is going in the strong room, whatever you say. I only thought you might like to be a man who chose it. Sir Gideon Rensham stood at that window for perhaps 15 seconds. No, he said, I will not withdraw. Because to withdraw was to say why, and there was only one why, and he had spent 22 months and £300 and his sister's daughter's silence to avoid ever saying it to himself out loud in a room. He walked back down the corridor, and Honor let him go. At 3:30, the master sent for the child. Mr. Colton, Sergeant Lyle. I have sat in this office 19 years, and I have never once done this, and I have latterly formed the view that this is nothing to be proud of. The ward will be brought in. Cecily Ardern came in with the tipstaff and stood where she was put, at the corner of the table, in a brown dress, with her hair not tightly done. She looked at nobody. Her father was 8 feet away, and her uncle was 10, and Honor was by the wall, and she did not look at any of the three of them. Cecily, said Master Ewbank, nobody in this room is going to ask you to say anything you don't wish to say. Do you understand that? Yes. I have one question, and then you may go. Where do you feel safest? She answered, without any pause at all, as a person answers who has had the question ready for some time, and has only been waiting for somebody to think of asking it, at Endersby. Because my mother's things are kept there, and nobody has ever taken any of them away from me. Aunt Augusta is kind, and she is kinder than anybody, but nobody at Grangeworth ever says my mother's name. And I had a birthday, and nobody said it all day. The pen of the master's clerk had stopped. And Lady Thirlstone tells me the truth even when it is not the answer I want. She was wrong about Miss Wynne, and she came all the way to Grangeworth in the dust to say out loud that she was wrong, to me, not to anybody else. Nobody has ever done that to me before. Thank you, said Master Ewbank, after a moment. You have a box, I am told, which was mentioned in the evidence. May I ask what is in it? My mother's letter. Would you be willing to let this court see it? No, said Cecily. Sergeant Lyle came half out of his chair. Sit down, Sergeant Lyle, said Master Ewbank, without looking round. Very well, Cecily. Then I shall not see it. 19 years, and he had never asked a child anything, and the first time he did, she told him no, and he took it. The tipstaff moved to take her out. Cecily turned instead and looked, for the first time since she had come into the room, directly at her uncle. Uncle Gideon, she said, I didn't give it to anybody. I only asked Lady Thirlstone to keep it for me, because it was getting heavy. Mama said I wasn't to give it to anybody, and I haven't. Gideon Rensham sat quite still, with his hands on the table. She had not accused him of anything. She had told a room full of lawyers that she was still guarding it. She was 8 years old. She had been taken out of her father's house on his petition. She had been asked 6 times in 5 months for the one thing she had. And she was standing at the corner of a table in Lincoln's Inn, keeping his sister's letter safe for him, because her mother had told her to. "Sir," he said, and had to say it twice to be heard. "Sir, I withdraw the petition." Sergeant Lyle turned in his seat. "Sir Gideon, I withdraw it," said Gideon Rensham. "I shall not be giving my reasons." He said it to her that night at Endersby in the small sitting room, standing just inside the door as he had stood in a back room in Marsden Cross 11 months before. "You are free of this. I said in October that I would keep every condition, and I have kept 4 of them, and the 5th I broke before you had finished saying it. I will not use her to hold you. If you want a separation, I will not defend it, and I will make you an allowance you cannot refuse. And Miss Ward's school is still open to you because I asked Colton to inquire in August, and he told me it is. It is open until the 1st of December, said Honor. I know. She wrote and told me so herself in July when I refused it. Nicholas did not move for a moment. You refused it in July. On the 14th, I walked to the post office in Briggate and put the letter in myself. She set down the book she had not been reading. I did not tell you. I did not tell anybody, and I want you to understand why. Because it is the only piece of arithmetic in this that is entirely mine. If I had waited until tonight to decide until you had asked me, in this room, after that then, I should never in my life have known whether I stayed because I chose to or because a man asked me at the right moment. So I settled it in July in a rented room with nobody watching and nothing decided and every chance of losing her. And it cost me £90 a year and the best work I shall ever be offered. And I have had 8 weeks to change my mind, and I have not changed it. Why? Because I came here for your daughter, said Honor, and I am not going to pretend otherwise, tonight or ever. And she will be told exactly that when she is old enough to ask. But I stayed for the house, not the title and not the acres, the thing that happens in it. I had a shop for 5 years, and I built it so that nobody could reach me. And I called it a quiet life, and it was a hiding place with books in it. This is not a hiding place. This is the first place in 6 years where I have been asked for anything. And I find that I would rather be asked for things than left alone. And I did not know that about myself in October. Nicholas crossed the room. He did not take her hand as a man taking what is owed to him. He put his out and waited, which took him about 4 seconds and cost him rather more, and she put hers into it. They chose it that night, honestly. Neither pretending it had begun as anything other than what it had been, nor pretending it had stayed that. The wardship was discharged by order of the Lord Chancellor on the 16th of October 1849, and the paper came down to Endersby by the ordinary post on the 18th in an envelope with nothing to distinguish it from a bill. There was no ceremony. Honor had thought about it and decided against it, and Nicholas had agreed within about a second, and so there were 3 people in the nursery on a Thursday afternoon, and nobody else in the house knew what the paper was. Honor read it out loud, all of it, including the parts that were incomprehensible, because it was the child's and she was entitled to the whole of it. Then she gave it to her. Cecily took the little brass key off the green ribbon and unlocked the walnut box, and did not take anything out of it. She folded the order of the Court of Chancery into 4 and put it in, on top of the gray glove and the blown egg and the card of pins and the folded letter that had come back to her from Lincoln's Inn unopened, and shut the lid and locked it. She did not call Honor mother. She never did that afternoon or afterwards, and nobody in that house ever asked her to. But when the lid was down, she put her hand into Honor's and held it carefully. the way she had once held the box itself, as a thing that had earned its place beside her. Downstairs later, somebody opened the pianoforte. It had not been tuned since 1846, and it was a long way out. And the person playing it was 8 years old and had not touched an instrument in 20 months. And it was, by any standard anybody in that house could have named, extremely bad. Nicholas Ardern stood in the doorway of his own morning room and did not go in and did not correct one note of it. Honor had never set out to take anyone's place. She had only ever meant to do the things she had once failed to do in time. She had not become a replacement countess. She had become the one who stayed.